areas have had experience, and I'd like to kind of gather that research and information to kind of give us best practices. But at the same time, I don't want to restrict ourselves saying, well, we can't do anything for maybe 4 or 5 years till the harbor landing sort of is fully rolled out. So I hope that in our evaluation criteria we've got the flexibility to keep moving forward as opposed to having to wait for these new greenfield developments to unfold.
Mr. Carlson.
Yes, Your Worship. Actually, that's a very good point. And our next step in the pilot project on Laneway Suites is to look for infill sites. So there's added complexities in retrofitting alleys within existing neighborhoods, excuse me, as well as existing residents. So the situation and context is different, so we do need to look for opportunities to do that in an infill setting, which we are currently in the works with Sask Housing on doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Just a couple of things on, do we know anything about what's going on with Greens on Gardner? Or is there any feedback or anything that's kicked back to us at all so far, or has it just been approved and we just let it go?
Mr. Carlson.
Your Worship, it's been very recent in terms of construction, so I'm not sure what experiences they've been had, but Ms. Howerluck might be able to speak to the uptake.
How about, do we know anything about sales of them? Or
Perhaps Ms. Howerluck can provide some information. Ms. Howerluck.
Through Your Worship, I don't have the exact number of sales. I know the developer had indicated that he had a number of people that were interested. There is no occupancies as of yet. That was the last information I had, but they are moving forward, and then once they are occupied for the year, then we'll have more information when we do our assessment, which is not only interviewing the neighbors, but interviewing the people that are utilizing the units.
Yeah. Because the part I'm asking is Councillor Burnett brings up a good point that this is probably 5 years away, and by then it might be past its best, whereas the Greens is already sort of on the mark. But the other thing that I just had a call actually this morning, in fact, about Laneway is what are we doing about not just a group of dwellings in an old area, but a one-off. One particular piece, one has a garage, they want to reinforce the garage, build a suite on top, and then 4 blocks away somebody wants to do another one. Are we working on anything in the bylaws to address that kind of a thing in terms of laneway suites, or even front where the driveway goes up the front, the garage is at the back of the property and the garage is there, and then build a suite on top? Is that something we're looking at as well?
Just a one-off? Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, we are looking at that as an infill pilot project, right, which could lead to one-off assessments. But Ms. Howerluck's team has been working on that, so I might defer to her in terms of where we're at right now.
Ms. Howerluck?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, as Mr. Carlston indicated, we are working at what are going to be our criteria. One of the factors with infill, or pardon me, secondary suites in greenfield, it's a little bit easier to implement secondary suites, but within an existing neighborhood, we have to be more sensitive to the neighborhood and the surroundings. So my team is working on a process on how we would evaluate criteria on moving forward for a pilot project that would look at a number of opportunities throughout the city, what the criteria would be, how they would be evaluated, how they would be selected. As Mr. Carlston said, there is some work that we're doing with Sask Housing regarding that, because as we all know, with intensification, we need to be sensitive to the existing neighborhood. So we're hoping that within the next few months, we'll have something forward for the Mayor's Housing Commission to contemplate regarding a pilot.
Direct a couple questions to Mr. Davies, if I may, if we could.
Mr. Davies, or to the administration?
Mr. Davies first.
Oh, to the delegation, okay.
Yes.
If you could identify yourself and who you represent and answer some questions.
Yes, my name is Mark Davis. I work for AECOM, and I'm here on behalf of Cinder Creek Products Limited, which is the developer of the Riverbend subdivision.
Thank you.
Okay, to your worship, just a question on the density. I'm trying to go through the report. Just give me a little bit more. How big is this? How many units? What are we building there?
Yes, it's now they're not approved construction plans or anything, but the preliminary plans that I've seen, we're looking at 3 buildings, a total of 180 units on the parcel.
And these are, to your worship, and these are 2 bedrooms, and the rental, are they going to be owner? How does that going to look like?
Mr. Davis?
My understanding is the plan is to be a condominium units, owned units, and I'm not sure exactly the bedroom, but I think for the most part, they would be two-bedroom units, is my understanding.
Okay. And then next question as we go around, I'm a little concerned with some of the density in the area already. Hasseltine is just one street that's going to carry most of the traffic in and out of the area. And then we're looking at, if you look at the report, it states that once we move into that particular build-out, we're going to need to add a transit into the area. So that's the questions I have about the density. Question would be, why the density? Why that many? Is there a reason for that? Your Worship?
Mr. Davis?
I don't know if I have a clear answer to that question. I know that the zoning allows for that density, and so that's the reason that we're looking at that. I know that the area was looking for that amount of development to provide for the needs of housing in the area.
Okay. And then I just have a question to you as a part of the syndicate. As the project's moving forward, my question is, as always was, finishing the landscaping and all that. I mean, I will ask administration also, but I just want to kind of get a little bit from you. How is that going to look like? Who is going to be responsible for doing the landscape from the lake to the walking path in that area, and when is it going to be finished, and what's the plans for all that, the whole area?
Mr. Davis?
To Ms. Wood.
Yes, there are several municipal reserve spaces that are part of the Riverbend subdivision development. The first three of those are developed. One's been accepted by the city. Two are under completion, and we expect to be accepted. The fourth, some grading work started last summer. We've had plans before the city for review, and have talked in concept of what we're doing there. Our plan with that is to get those approved this spring, complete the work this summer, and be finished. Actually, that would complete the subdivision. That with the development of these last couple of vacant parcels would complete the development of that Riverbend subdivision.
Okay. Thank you. I have questions to the administration afterwards when we.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davis. You can return to the gallery and to the administration. You only speak once on the motion, so questions now, or
No.
you have to continue on if you only have one chance to speak on the
Okay.
motion.
Thank you, Worship. So, through your Worship, to the administration, then again, let's have a quick conversation on transit. My question is, as the stresses are in front of us here on transit, here we are, we're going to be allowing to build out this, and then there'll be an ask for transit. What is it going to look like? What stresses that's going to put on the area? Could someone give me that answer, please? To your Worship.
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, as neighborhoods grow out, as they populate, we always look at extending transit services. So within the concept plan area, transit is always a consideration and accounted for in terms of route planning, and it's just a matter of budgeting and population pacing of population growth and budgeting. So annually we look at that and look at what transit extensions are required and what's warranted and how that relates to budget. So that's how we would approach this in the same way.
Councilor Ventura?
Just to your Worship, question on, I mean, it's just a concept now, but I'm looking at when this is going to be developed, most of the parking is going to be on the inside. So I say there won't be too much of the spill into the street parking. That's my concern again with parking and with traffic in the area. How is that going to look like?
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, this application for rezoning really doesn't get into the details of specific development. The rezoning is consistent with the concept plan. So the concept plan accounts for high density here, and all projections within that neighborhood in terms of traffic generation and so forth would have been accounted for when the concept plan was reviewed and approved. So once a specific development proposal comes forward, if it's a permitted use, then it's subject to zoning bylaw regulations for parking. So they have to accommodate parking, landscape, and so forth on site, and that's accommodated through the zoning bylaw. And if there is a discretionary use element to that, so a plan group of 3 buildings would likely come through Planning Commission and to City Council, so there'd be a higher level of scrutiny applied and approval by Council required for the site plan, which would include parking.
Okay.
Councilor Ventura?
So then, I know this is, one more bigger question is about the memorandum of understanding that is within the Riverbend or the condominium associations. How does that look like for the whole area? If someone's asking, someone's buying into it, someone's buying the area, what does that look like?
Mr. Carlston?
Who's got MOUs with whom, and how does that work with the residents themselves? Your Worship.
Your Worship, I'm not familiar with what condominium associations might have between each other within the Riverbend area. I know we do have a master servicing concept plan that they're subject to. Is that the line of questioning?
That's part of the question. Is that what the ownership? What I'm looking at within the MOU for the area, for instance, landscaping, or once the city takes over, what does that look like for us as a taxpayer?
Mr. Carlston?
For the most part, on-site development, the city doesn't take over. That's all constantly privately owned and privately maintained. Regarding the park development, I might turn that over to Mr. Brown to speak to the servicing agreement fee transition of parks to city ownership.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Worship. Yes, through the servicing agreement process, a number of the conditions and obligations in terms of what the condominium association is required to maintain in terms of private infrastructure is passed on through the servicing agreement between the city and the developer at that time. That at the same time also allows for and includes things like MR spaces, like such as the pathway, which ultimately is actually a city facility, which would be taken care of in that respect.
Okay, Worship. So, through you,
Sure.
this is going to we're going to see this again,
Oh, yeah.
and so I'm okay with that. I'm going to see this again. I'd like to see how that's going to build out, type of thing. So it's been taking way too long for that particular area, Your Worship, to get a finding done. I'm just anxious to see it done and see how that's going to look like. Thank you, Your Worship.
I think all we're seeing here is a zoning amendment, not the application for any development in the area. So, any other speakers on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to Executive Committee report. Councillor Hawkins. This is report 1427, City Administration Reorganization and Bylaw Amendments.
Your Worship, I move that the city solicitor be instructed to prepare necessary changes to the zoning district bylaw to affect the organizational change taken in the body of it.
Thank you for that. Are there comments on this? Questions on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, just a question for administration. Is there any added cost to this reorganization? Thanks.
Mr. Davies?
Your Worship, through you, at this point, there are none. Excuse me. It will be an iterative process, and as changes occur to the organization, we'll deal with any additional costs in year through variancing, and then subsequent years, additional costs will be presented to council for approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Other speakers on the question? I have a question on Mr. Davies. If you could just give perhaps a historical context of the reorganization, where I know several years ago there was a higher number of senior management, and I would say there's less now. So perhaps a contextual comment on the report itself. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been here for about 8 years. I think this is our third formal reorganization that's taken place. The intent or approach that administration is taking is that in a fast-paced, changing environment, we need to be an organization that adapts and changes as required to stay current and to be productive at the same time. The initial reorganization, and I'm going by memory here, of course, but we went from 9 senior managers to 4. We've subsequently done a reorganization that took us from 4 to 3. This reorganization, the configuration is different. We have a slightly larger number of senior managers, but in a variety of levels. The intent here is multi-purpose in the sense that we're looking to become more efficient. One of the goals of the reorganization was to eliminate some stovepiping in the organization so that we had information sharing and communications up and down the organization in a more effective way. The presentation of the reorganization is also one that presents as a single senior administrator responsible for all services facing the community, and a senior manager responsible for all of the back office services. So that's, in a nutshell, that would be the presentation. In all of that, we've seen some considerable savings over time with our reorganizations, as you might expect, going from 9 senior managers to 4 and 3. I will say to you that cost savings has never been a major driver of our reorganizations, but rather it's been about becoming more effective and carrying out the business of the city more effectively. However, consistent with Councillor Fraser's question, as costs are adjusted, we will be accommodating those and going through proper approval processes.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Other comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have 4 bylaws. Councillor Hawkins?
Just a procedure, if you could do bylaw 2014-19 by itself, and then I'll declare again. Thank you.
Okay. We'll do. We also have a slight amendment on 14 as well. So if you introduce Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if we could read 2014-28 separately as well.
Separate? Okay.
Your Worship, I have a procedural matter as well. I'm prepared to move 19, 27, and 28, but I'm not prepared to move 4, given my objection stated earlier.
Okay, so let's make this real interesting here. Who's the acting deputy mayor? Councillor Murray, can you do number 4, please?
Yep.
And there'll be a slight amendment on that one, and I'll read what this should be, and this would be a slight change in number. If members look at that bylaw, one number change on 1A.2, we should read from 33 and change to 63, just a number change. So if I could have a motion and then a seconder for that.
Your Worship, you can, just I got to find that bylaw in my, I wasn't prepared to read that, so just give me 1 second while I find it. All right, so I do have it. So do we want to do 4 then first?
Yes, we could do 4 first.
Okay, so I moved, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaw 2014-4 be read a first time.
Okay, now I need an amendment for that number, so if someone can move an amendment for the number. This is, again, it's number 1A point 2. The reference is from number 33 to 63. Seconder, please.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. This is a public bylaw, so I'd ask Mr. Clerk if anyone wants to speak to the bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider the specific bylaw as per the requirements of the Planning and Development Act, that being bylaw 2014-4 as amended, respecting laneway suites. If there are any members of the public who would like to address Council on this bylaw, I would now ask you to identify yourself.
If you could identify yourself, who you represent, you have 10 minutes for presentation, and there may be questions of members of council afterwards.
Hi, I'm Wade Proby from PR Investments. I guess I'm speaking, this just came to my attention yesterday, so I apologize. I'm actually speaking against laneways. Housing, I've been in the business now, this is actually 30 years of property management, and we've come to be known to the public as a fairly professional property managers. In those 30 years, I've learned a lot of things about the industry, and I guess as I said, I'm opposing this, and I'm going to use the word respectfully, that we're in a new phase, and I'm seeing too much of it. It's called pardon my expression, bastardization of housing. It's the word. I don't know what.
I'd ask you to withdraw the word.
Okay, I can withdraw it.
Please.
I don't know what word. Yeah, no, I did. I withdrew it.
Thank you.
Is It's not an.
It's a derogation?
Sorry?
A derogation from the concept?
I'm
But
sorry.
not the word you used.
You change the word, is that what you're asking?
You can change it, but not the word you used.
Yeah, no, I won't. But it's the concept used in the public eye, I guess, is what it is, right? It's conventional, fragmented. I think I've learned a word from someone else. Way of putting housing in the marketplace. I've asked, and I apologize. I really, again, strong Catholic beliefs. It's just the term. There's getting to be too much of this in our marketplace, and I don't know if realtors. They're pushing a lot for sales. And for any term, any way that we can make a sale is what I think is going on in the public. I'm seeing it in cathedral areas. I'm seeing it in many different areas. This concept of a laneway housing, this isn't a pilot project. I've seen it just a couple blocks away from Miller, that they've got a couple of these laneway residences that are popping up. And I guess I've got some concerns because we're selling things with the concept of something special to homeowners, that they're going to have this way that we charge rents whatever we want and however we're going to make our living. They're going to get caught into a situation where there's going to be, the housing isn't correctly processed, right? And what I mean by that is conventional housing has all the components of fire regulations, egress, controls that have front and back fire codes, everything that we can to keep people safe. When we start opening up too many little loose ends in the cathedral area, all these other places where we just put in suites, secondary suites, into basements, into third floors, and now we're doing laneways in the new areas, I don't believe we're going down the right path. I like the idea, if we're going to try one, we try it and it goes slowly. I can maybe potentially live with that. But the idea that someone says, let's keep trying more and more, I'm concerned about privacy issues for my families. All of a sudden, you can see into the backyard of someone else's house. You can see into the window of someone else's bedroom. There's lots of issues of why a family residence area is nice, right? If we keep the conventional idea, maybe try some certain things, great, but I passed out and this is for you, Mr. Fougere. I'd like to have a picture drawn or passed out, if that's possible. Everyone received it? This is, and the housing, which is kind of, I find, ironical, is here we're looking for special housing, right? Unique ways to find housing, and I don't know what the rates are, but I've had a 3.5-year fight to get this process built and to make 9 suites with 9 parking spots in the alley. So I'm finding it difficult to believe that we're looking for laneway housing outside where they're going to need cars, for sure, right? Specific parking. I can't get this processed, dealt with, in the cathedral area, and at $550 a month rent for a 1-bedroom. I have one of those suites completely done. It's got to act as a storage room because I can't get that passed, but we're looking for unconventional suites that are causing problems with parking, which Mr. Hawkins is speaking wisely to, right? These are all issues that we have. All the houses in that area, they've all been turned into suites and basements that are old. They don't have wiring issues. They're grandfathering. There's lots of issues that haven't been addressed. And I don't know if the new stuff that's being dealt with is going to have some of the same concerns that this is already developing. We have a lot of this. If you go on the internet, use Regina Kijiji, holy cow, there's a lot available. And I think a lot of homeowners are going to find themselves in trouble because they don't have the background knowledge. They're just hearing from the public saying, build and you can rent it out for whatever. Wrong message. It's not the right message. Again, don't trust me. Go and use Regina and Kijiji, and you'll see, I think, 48 pages of rentals. I have a partner in the North Central that is working on building front and back splits. Now, that's good. They're building nice, great, brand new housing. This laneway stuff, I cannot support, because it's already created too much catastrophe in the cathedral and other areas of the city that we're allowing. And they're popping out without even you guys knowing. I talked to Ada Chan Russell. She didn't even know that there was one built. I had to go to one of the assessors to let her know that. So it's a concern to have too much of this secondary suite, unregulated housing that we're starting to allow. I think that's my submission. And again, I do apologize. That wasn't intended for any insult. It was just the term that's used down in the streets.
I think the term you wanted to use was fragmentation.
Well, I've never heard it before.
Fine. Thank you. Are you finished?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of the delegation? Councilor Bryce.
Thank you. One of the concerns you brought up was privacy, but when I look at this looks like it's looking into somebody else's yard and possibly looking into, because it's 3 stories high.
Yeah.
You don't have concerns of privacy with your own property?
That's a front street view that you're looking at?
Yeah.
That's a front street, right? And that was a contract zone that we went through the commission on. So it's already built, everything's sitting there, right? And it's not in the back alley that we're looking with windows wherever they could be, right? That's my submission, is everyone knows that this is an apartment building designed to look like houses for the area. So I have no concerns, because people, they've actually been asked before we built this if they had any concerns. The residents right beside them.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this doesn't look down onto somebody else's yard at all?
No, it's a regular apartment building. Apartment buildings are built as such. The back faces the alley, like their parking lot, and the front faces the street. And the bedrooms are all hidden.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. If there's no other questions, you can return to the gallery. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll continue on with the reading of bylaw 14-4. After the first reading, you can speak.
Okay, so, Your Worship, just so that I'm on the same page, so I've moved, seconded by Councilor Fraser. We had an amendment that was approved,
right,
but I don't believe we voted on.
No, we're not. We're going to vote on it now.
Okay.
Because this is the time we ask for public input. Now we'll vote on reading number 1.
All
those in favor? First reading? Opposed? On first reading? As amended, yes. Okay. Councilor Murray, for second reading.
Okay, so I move, seconded by Councilor Burnett, that bylaw 2014-4 go to second reading at this meeting.
Thank you. Other discussion on this one? Councilor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the delegation, some good points raised. Just a question for administration. Supposing somebody does build a secondary detached suite, how do we handle that? I mean, it could happen that someone's doing it without our knowledge. If we find out what can we do about that?
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, the types of secondary suites that might be constructed without city knowledge are typically those that would be built in an existing basement or retrofitted basement that we might not be aware of because there might not be a building permit. What we've been seeking through the pilot project and through the secondary suite regulations that Council approved some time ago is some certainty and providing some guidance and a process to ensure that we're aware of the secondary suites that are built. So I'm not aware of a secondary suite that would have been built in a new structure without the city's knowledge.
Okay.
Councilor Fraser?
Supposing we were aware of that, have we ever taken any recourse in the city for somebody building a detached secondary suite?
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, I could speak more generally that if construction is occurring without a building permit and it's observed either by the city or called in by a resident, we would issue a stop work order immediately.
Sure. Okay, thanks for that. And a final question was brought up, of course, with fire safety should be our first priority, no doubt. How does regulation on this pilot project, how does that relate to our regular fire standard? You know, is the suite above the garage, is it anything less than the actual house would be when it comes to fire regulation?
Mr. Carlson?
Your Worship, any new construction on secondary suites is required to meet the National Building Code, so it would meet all the same codes that are required of other regular residential construction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other comments on second reading? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise then to read bylaw number 2014-4 going to third reading at this meeting, and that be seconded by Councillor Flagel.
Okay, any comments on this stage? What's that?
Point of order, we can't have third reading at this meeting, I don't think.
Yes, we can.
It wasn't unanimous second reading?
We have, we voted second, this is now third reading. We haven't taken the vote yet. We have to vote.
I thought second reading was, we needed second
No.
unanimous. Okay.
No, the next one is. This one coming up is.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? The bylaw is defeated, and we'll consider the next reading of next meeting of City Council. You're right, Councilor Fraser, just the next step. Okay, so we'll move on to bylaw 2014-19. Councilor Hawkins.
Your Worship, I move
I'll
second.
declare what's the right?
A conflict?
Conflict.
And the reason why?
Vested interest.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move seconded by Councillor Findura that bylaw 2014-19 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? I guess we should see if there's any public discussion on this one. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council is now going to be considering bylaw 2014-19 respecting rezoning on Heseltine Road. And if there are members of the public who would like to address council on this bylaw, you now have that opportunity and should indicate your interest and come forward at this time. There appears to be no one, Your Worship.
Councilor Murray. We had a vote on first reading already, so we'll go into second reading now. Oh, sorry, Councilor Hawkins, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move seconded by Councillor Bryce that bylaw 2014-19 be read a second time.
Any comments on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Thank you. I move seconded by Councillor Young that council hereby consents to bylaw 2014-19 go to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move seconded by Councillor Murray that bylaw 2014-19 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 14-27. I think Councillor Flagel should come back in. Proceed.
I move seconded by Councillor Findura that bylaw 2014-27 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council is now considering bylaw 2014-27, respecting the administrative functions and responsibilities of certain city officials and employees. Again, members of the public who would like to address council on this bylaw now have that opportunity and should indicate their interest and come forward at this time. It appears there is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. I move seconded by Councillor Murray that bylaw 2014-19 be read a second time.
27.
27, I'm sorry, be read a second time.
Any comments on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move seconded by Councillor Flagel that bylaw 2014-27 go to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move seconded by Councillor Burnett that bylaw 2014-27 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The last bylaw here is a report to 14-28.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move seconded by Councillor Burnett that bylaw 2014-28 be read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council is now considering bylaw 2014-28 respecting debentures related to the Regina Revitalization Initiative. If there are members of the public who would like to address council on this bylaw, they now have that opportunity and should indicate their interest and come forward at this time. It appears there is no one, Your Worship.
Call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that bylaw 2014-28 be read a second time.
Any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, sir. I plan not to support this motion on the first two readings this last time. $100 million is a lot. We have a lot of expenses we're going to have to pay for in the coming years, and I don't think this is the city. This is our top priority, although I will reluctantly support on the third reading because I appreciate that to hold this project up on a big project like this could cause major cost overruns or something like that when likely this would pass next meeting anyway. So,
thank you, Councillor Fraser. I have a question of the administration. We did pass the bylaw before, so I'm wondering why this is here. To just explain why we have the bylaw back again. Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, this amendment to the bylaw is really housekeeping change. The wording in the original bylaw that came forward required a couple corrections just to be consistent with the credit facility provided by the province. So there's no substantive changes, really just a housekeeping change.
Okay, that's good. So good to hear. I'll call a question on this on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that Council hereby consents to bylaw 2014-28 go to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Hawkins.
Finally, Your Worship, I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaw 2014-28 be read a third reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll move to delegations. Our first delegation, bylaw delegations and communications and related reports, is Linda McKenzie. McKenzie, if you could identify yourself and who you represent, you have 10 minutes for presentation, and there may be questions of members of council afterwards.
Thank you. My name is Linda McKenzie, and I'm here representing, I suppose, myself. This presentation is related to the agenda item CR 14-28, Edward Street Sewer and Drainage Recommendations. Background. At the July 8th, 2013 council meeting, the administration was directed to provide an informational report on the application for contract zoning for a proposed development of townhouses at 2220 Edward Street, and a report through the Public Works Committee related to the current flood and sewer issues in the 2220 Edward Street area. I attended the March 13th, 2014 Public Works Committee meeting, at which the administration's recommendations and report on this subject was presented. I will leave it to the chair of the committee and the other councillors who serve on the committee to explain their decision. My recommendations and concerns. I fully support the decision of the committee not to accept the administration's recommendations as submitted. I urge you as a council to do the same. My presentation to you is intended to present my concerns arising from the administration's recommendations and the associated report for the public record. The issue of limited capacity, aging, and overloading of the domestic sewer systems at both the local and trunk levels has been recognized as the cause of sewer backup in the cathedral area for more than 40 years. The cathedral area neighborhood plan outlines the problem and recommends solutions. The consultant who contributed to this report has confirmed what was already clear when the neighborhood plan was incorporated in 1988. Fuller surcharged conditions in the Wascana trunk sewer main is still the leading cause of basement flooding in the cathedral area. Sanitary sewer options 1 and 2 and storm system option 1, as identified by the consultant, are not recommended by the administration. The recommended options for both problems are to defer both wastewater and storm system improvements for further evaluation. This is not acceptable to me nor the long-suffering residents. The action I'm requesting is no more delay in referral. The backup prevention solutions recommended by the administration's subsidy program have already been installed by several residents. they have failed to prevent further sewer backups. The installation of the backflow valve recommended by the manufacturer was not considered nor evaluated by the administration. This should be done in a timely and professional manner, including an evaluation of any potential system problems that this type of device may cause. The action I'm requesting is support the directions from the Public Works Committee to the administration. The sanitary sewer option, 2, states it is important to note that forcing more flow into the Wascana trunk sewer main is likely to shift the problem to another area of the city. Despite this notation, no effort has been made to ensure that the sewer system has enough capacity to incorporate any flows from the proposed 2220 Edward Street development. The city's development standards, section 08, 2.1.2, wastewater collection system, states that it shall be the responsibility of the developer to demonstrate the serviceability of the development. In particular, no new development shall reduce the service level of the existing collection system below an acceptable level. The existing service is already unacceptable. It cannot be allowed to get worse. Action requested is to direct the administration to ensure compliance with this requirement before a building permit is issued for the new development at 2220 Edward Street. I also request that in the future the administration revise their risk evaluation priorities to reflect that sewer backup is a serious risk to public health and property, as well as a service interruption. Thank you for your attention. I am especially grateful for the work of the members of the Public Works Committee regarding this issue. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie, for your presentation. Any comments or questions? Councilor Bryce and Councilor Murray.
Thank you for your presentation. Through you, Mr. Mayor, do you live on this space of land in Edward Street?
I live on Princess Street. I'm on the edge of what would be the flood fringe of this area,
Great.
yes.
So what motivated you to come forward and do all this research regarding this Edward Street issues that they're having?
Well, I walk in that park every day, and it's part of my neighborhood. I've seen it when it floods. I've met the people. They're my neighbors, my friends, and I would hope that I'm in a position to be able to do it, and being semi-retired and pushing 60 really hard. So I would hope that if I was in the same position, somebody who had the time to do the research and would come out and do it on my behalf as well. These people have worked with me on other issues, and I care about my neighborhood. Plus, I'm in the area where that sewage backup would move to if pressure increases.
Just if you allow me a little leeway, I just want to thank you for being concerned about your neighbors and for taking that time to do the research and help them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Councilor Murray?
Thanks, Your Worship, and thank you very much for taking some questions. In your submission, you referred to the backup prevention solutions recommended by the administration subsidy program have already been installed by several residents. So you're familiar then with specific residents who have put in corrective measures to stop backflow and they failed?
Yes. Through Your Worship, I didn't want to include a lot of that information because the Public Works Committee, who I think are a model of how committees should work, brought up these issues, and there will be another submission who will be more specific. So rather than, I'm not refusing to answer your question, but I think there's somebody who that information was presented at Public Works, and that same person will be here. I think you would be better to ask them, but yes, that was what was said.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I don't sit on work, so I'm a little bit disconnected from it, so I just appreciate that. So do you have a backflow prevention valve installed in your home?
In my home, no.
And you're right close to the floodplain?
I am just outside of the flood fringe area on the map that's included with the administration's submission to you, report to you.
Okay.
I am maybe half, I suppose, not one short city block past it.
You're just about have lakefront property sometimes. Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other questions or comments? Councilor Fraser?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks a lot for your presentation. I'm just curious, do you think the incentive rates that we have set up, 60% of cost up to $3,000, is that enough to actually incentivize people to uptake this?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if you didn't read it or if I was nervous saying it. These backflow prevention, the residents of the 17 residents, my understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that the Public Works Committee and the residents are quite clear that these valves cannot withstand the pressure. The recommended valve cannot withstand the pressure of the back surcharge from the main trunk. So you could subsidize it up 100% and it still wouldn't solve the problem. I don't think I certainly don't intend to say that the city shouldn't work on pilot projects or that they shouldn't subsidize it when there has been real loss, but I would like to think that the money would go someplace where it would at least be effective.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other questions of the delegation? Councilor Fundura.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. I have a quick question. In here, in your submission, you mentioned something about stopping or halting the new project that's coming in there. Can you just give me more? How would you want to see that? I mean, I know that we've passed it through and all that, but you mentioned something about stopping it before this gets fixed. To your worship.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I wish I was as articulate as Councillor Hawkins, but I'm asking that the current bylaws and requirements be followed, and that is clearly before a building permit is issued. The capacity of the system has to be verified. To not do that is not only adding insult to injury to those residents who are having problems, it could expand it, and it could jeopardize the development itself. Unless I am reading the bylaws incorrectly, it shall be done. I think it has to be done, and I'm asking that that be followed, and it be followed before a permit is issued, because I don't want the developer to end up building something and then finding out that it's causing a terrible, terrible problem. I think that's why we have a planning department, to plan ahead, and I want that followed for that reason.
Thank you for the answer.
That was a very articulate answer.
That was very good. Thank you.
Councilor
Thank you,
Fundura.
Worship.
Other questions? You can return to the gallery now. We'll go to our next delegation, and that is Wanda Silzer. If you could please come forward, identify yourself, who you represent, and you as well have 10 minutes for your presentation.
I brought a toy. Oh. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. My name is Wanda Silzer, and I'm representing West Cathedral in regards to the Edward Street sewer and drainage issues. I attended the Public Works Committee to express resident concerns regarding the three options for dealing with our sewer and drainage issues and the backup prevention subsidy program. Nothing was really solved, so we are here again to inquire what, if anything, has changed. None of these options really solve our problems in any way. Option 1 gives us an offline storage tank that will reduce but not eliminate the severity of flooding. Option 2 offers a sanitary line that flows south but will not reduce the flow to the Wascana trunk main that will likely shift the flooding to another area and take a long time to construct. Option 3 offers nothing but a wait-and-see option. None of these options fix anything in the foreseeable future. Many of the sewer and storm lines are also cross-connected. We've all been flooding for decades, and with the city's knowledge as it is. Our basements have become the sewer storage tanks, and many of us are no longer have insurance because of it. To make it worse, we can't even sell our homes because we would have to disclose these issues, thus reducing our property values. The health risks are even worse. The backup prevention subsidy program offers nothing to me personally as it is. I had already installed the approved backflow valve and still flooded twice in 3 days. I have since installed backflow valves on every basement drain and a gate valve. Your program also doesn't say anything about restitution for those of us that have already taken these extreme and expensive measures. The backflow valve suggested does not work for us in this situation. There is far too much pressure and volume, thus not giving the backflow valve the chance to work, making it useless. There is almost no slope from our homes to the city sewer connection, which was pointed out to me by the company I hired to replace my sewer. I also share a connection with my neighbor, which many residents in our area do as well. I have since installed a gate valve behind the backflow valve that I have to manually shut off. So generally, if it's raining, I have to run downstairs in the morning to check and see if I can shower, then open the gate valve, shower, close the gate valve before I go to work, open the gate valve again, if not raining, when I get home, and remember to close it before I go to bed. Many occasions we have not been able to use any water for more than 24 hours at a time. This is ridiculous, but what I've had to do for the last couple of years. Now, if you expect half the neighborhood to do the same thing. Automatic gate valve suggested is not available here, and when it was many years ago, they were $1,100. This is the actual valve that I have in my basement. It has an open flapper design, which basically it stays open all the time. So when the sewer floods, it's supposed to float up on its own and close. But in our situation, it floods so rapidly and with such force, it doesn't give the flapper a chance to actually work at all. The company that makes this valve sent me a fix for it, but it's a closed flapper design. So they can take out the existing flapper that's in this one and replace it with a closed flapper design. But I've also been told by the city that I'm not allowed to use this because then the city can't vent the city sewer out my stack. I've provided you with pictures and literature on this valve as well. A Ripplinger home built on York and 13th flooded once during the build and once after the build. Once after the homeowners took possession, which caused the builder to cover the costs of repairs. Other residents on that side of Louvain have the same issues as we do as well. To change this flapper to the closed flapper design will cost an additional $200. There is a new valve made with a closed flapper design that's just new, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to use it or not for new installations, since this hasn't worked for the few of us that have it already. None of these valves are meant to be under pressure. They could fail or burst sewer lines, either on my side or the city's. When this actually has worked in my home, it actually hisses from the pressure that is in the sewer. The Wascana trunk main needs to be increased in size and cross connections of sewer and storm fixed. If I cannot add a second bathroom in my basement, no other building of any kind should be added here until the flooding issues are rectified and in a timely manner. If we were all to flood again tomorrow, you, the city, would be liable. We have all paid the consequences of the city's negligence for the last 4 decades, so it's now your turn, as summer is coming and so is another season of flooding.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Sulzer. There may be questions from members of council. Councillor Hinks?
Thank you again, Ms. Sulzer. I had an email today saying, first off, that the National Plumbing Code says that you can't use that sort of valve from Mr. Van der Werf. And in the same email, it says that city inspectors are prohibited from providing recommendations to homeowners regarding home plumbing systems to implement. Did the city not recommend that to you in the first place?
No, I found out about this all on my own.
No, the other one.
No, the city didn't. I actually asked for it.
Oh, okay.
When I had my sewer dug up, I actually asked for the clear top.
Was there something the city recommended though, as a cure for it?
No.
No. Okay.
I've done all of this on my own.
Okay. Have you been in talks with the people at City Hall?
I had a couple of calls today. Once saying that I can't use this now, when I was told I could use it a few days ago. Now I can't. And another one on what exactly I have going on in my basement as far as plumbing, because all my plumbing has been replaced inside my house and out to the street, the city service.
Okay, thank you. Can I address
Councillor Hinks?
question to
No, delegation first, and then we go to administration afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Councillor Bryce, and then Councillor Hawkins after.
Thank you for coming forward. Do you pay your water bill every month?
Yes, I do.
Do you pay your sewer bill every month?
Yes.
Are there times when you can't use your water and sewer, and how often does that happen?
A fair bit in the summer, and obviously spring, summer, fall, and often for more than 24 hours at a time.
So has the city ever offered to rebate you paying for something you don't get?
Not at all. I've actually phoned them in tears and begged them to stop pumping into one specific sewer I know that floods me, and because I was in so much pain I couldn't stand hauling any more water, and that never got anywhere.
So the fluids that end up in your basement, are they body fluids from other people?
I'm assuming so, because I don't I don't want to describe what's in my basement when that happens, but it's not pleasant, and the sewer gas is so strong it burns your eyes, and I've actually had to take my pets to my parents' place because nobody should be in the house. It's that strong.
For sure. And you go downstairs daily and shut this manual valve off?
Numerous times a day.
Numerous times a day. Thank you very much for coming forward and giving us your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Ms. Seltzer, and thank you as well. I want to thank you for coming forward. You fought a long fight here. In the email that we received from Mr. Van Dort at 5 o'clock today, one that Councillor Hinks referred to, Mr. Van Dort went on to say, we've discussed other possible options with Ms. Seltzer, including an automated shut-off valve in place of the manual valve she has installed. This option will require further follow-up to find a CSA-approved source that could be approved for the pilot project. Be interested to know what your reaction is to the idea of the automated shut-off valve that's referred to here.
Just like a sump pump, even that, you would have to have a battery backup, because if the power ever went out, which it has, and, my sump pump has quit, so then it's, you're even in a more emergency situation. And you can't get them here. I've contacted the suppliers, the wholesalers. They don't even know about this fix. They haven't been able to stock the automatic gate valves. They were available once for a small town named Morse many, many years ago, and they've never been able to source them since. And that many years ago, they were $1,100 at that time. So nobody's been able to source them since then.
I'm going to follow up, Your Worship. This is a sad story. Do you have any other suggested solutions, or what other suggested solutions do you have to the problem which you and your neighbors are facing?
Short of putting in this flapper or installing the closed option backwater valve, I don't really have any options. Like, the only thing I can see is fix the sewer outside my house, and that's I've done everything I can do to save my basement, or to save my home. At this point, I'm at a loss for anything else that I could possibly do. I can't even install a basement in my own house, or a basement bathroom in my own house.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks so much for your presentation here. So specific changes you'd like to see to the drainage, to the subsidy program. Supposing this is part of the option that's agreed upon tonight, what would you like to see changed?
Well, the subsidy, it doesn't, we've done the work already. Like, I've spent the money.
Sure.
And I don't know if I'm allowed to apply for the subsidy.
Okay.
Because the way it's spelled out on their letter, it's for new installs only. And on top of that, I already know it doesn't work. Because I've had it fail twice in 3 days.
Sure. Okay. I'm wondering also, you're familiar with the Reed-Crowther report, 1999?
Yes.
Do you have any comment on the information from that, or do you have any other comments you'd like to ask?
Well, I just discovered that on Saturday night. So I was reading it, and everything laid out there is exactly, pretty much on those specific pages, is exactly what happens in our area. And they've provided all the fixes needed for it. So I just don't understand why they had to apply to do yet another survey when it was already in the 1988 Cathedral Area Association neighborhood plan, and as well in the 1999 report as well.
So specifically, out of that report, is there one fix that you would like to see? I mean, beyond obviously the subsidy program is an interim fix, but given that this problem, the big fix can't happen this month.
That's true.
What's the big fix, do you think?
Increasing the size of the Wascana trunk main, and then the sewer on our street is actually almost level with our sewers. So either our basements are too low or the sewer is too high. I'm not sure which one it is, but there's no slope. So, and these have already proved not to work, and they're not meant to be under pressure. And the kind of pressure that we have, I mean, when it bypasses this, it'll flood up to the floor joist of my house. That's how much pressure that is in there. So I don't know that, short of like this, other than my gate valve, that's the only thing saving me right now. If this lid were to blow off, or the whole top of this thing broke and exploded, I would have raw sewage everywhere. And I have no insurance anymore at this point because of my numerous floods. The company decided I can't get insurance anywhere at this point, basically.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report for us. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I stand on behalf of Public Works Committee for 14-28. The recommendation in the report is slightly different than what we recommended at Public Works. We actually asked that this be brought forward to Public Works every meeting until there's a fix for this. So I think I need a seconder to amend that.
I'll second it.
Councillor Hinks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hinks.
You want to speak to the amendment, or go back to the name? You want to speak to the amendment?
No, I don't need to speak to the amendment. It speaks for itself, but I need to speak on the main motion.
Okay. Any questions on the amendment, which is to have a continual report back to Works and Utilities until the problem's fixed? Questions, comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. We had quite a discussion at Public Works regarding this issue with the flooding on Edward Street. And we really thought it was a public health issue, and our jobs as councillors are to ensure the health of the public of Regina. So we felt it was a huge priority for us to get this issue dealt with, and sooner rather than later. We want something permanent done so that these residents can live in their houses without running up and down the stairs to turn off a valve every time they turn around. So I'm going to let the rest of the committee speak on this, and then I will close debate.
Close debate?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Other speakers? Councillor Fundera.
Thank you, Worship. I'm seeing through you the 105,000. If I can just hear, what is that going to do, Your Worship?
To the administration, Mr. Vandendort, either with you or?
Your Worship, I'll refer this question to Pat Wilson, Director of Waterworks.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The $105,000 would be sufficient for the individuals in the pilot project, which would be about 35 homes that have identified, that are within that area, identified in the map, and that have identified problems, to install some devices that they would work through with their plumber. The amount would be approximately $5,000 would approximately cover the cost of a backflow preventer and a sump pump, although those may not be the options chosen by individual customers.
Thank you, Your Worship. And then just to move further, some questions were raised that the Wascana trunk should be made bigger, larger, to take more flow. Is that some kind of an option in the near future, or, I mean, we don't have too much of the future. The future is right now. So to Your Worship, what would be the fix on the trunk then?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, the work that was mentioned in the report regarding the wastewater system overall and reviewing it is intended to identify what some of the options are. There is in the city's long-term utility study or long-term utility model funding identified in approximately 2018 and 2019 for currently identified for twinning of the south trunk, which would take some of the strain off of the Wascana trunk. So rather than expanding the Wascana trunk, it would move some of the flow there.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Ventura. Other speakers? Councilor Hinks. Do you want to turn your microphone on, Councilor Hinks?
At the Public Works meeting, in questioning city officials, I was really disappointed in the kind of attention that these people are getting, and the problem has been around for so long. I really think they should be given more time and discussion about and finding a solution to this problem, because obviously it's been a long time problem, and they've actually been very patient about it, and I just believe with the expertise that the city has, they should be helping these people and looking for a real long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hinks. Councilor Flagel.
Thanks. I do, I mean, we're talking Edward Street all the time, and it's Edward Street, Edward Street. I've always approved the rental project that's going in, because that's a totally separate issue. And I was under the impression that this was all going to be fixed and looked after, maybe not as they built, but as time went on within the next 6 months to a year to 2 years, should have all been finished. But if I could ask a question, I'm hearing that we can, it's almost like we're saying we're going to, for $100,000 or whatever it is, it's like a piecemeal, this piece, that piece, this piece. Cost aside, to fix this problem properly, what are we looking, like what do we do? Because if we start throwing a back valve here and a back valve there, I mean, really, come on. If the sewer lines are too small, let's look at replacing them. If they're proper and they just need to be spawned off a little bit more to add to there, and then also what the one delegation brought up, what about York Street? It's on the same system. If they're having flooding issues, next year we're going to have to deal with that as well, or maybe this year. But cost aside, is the system completely failing, or are we pretty confident, we better be 100% confident that a $5,000 backflow to each house, or whatever it is going to be, is it going to fix the problem? Do we know that? And I'd like to hear an answer on something, because this has gone on long enough, and hey, if we have to change the trunk line, then we got to change it. Simple as that.
Mr. Wilson?
Your Worship, the long-term solution is to look at something like twinning the south line. There may be options regarding Wascana Trunk itself, although that is a very complex issue. That is, again, the information that we are seeking by doing the calibration of the wastewater system, looking for what the best option is and where all of the issues are for various customers. The $5,000 or the 60% of $5,000 for these individual customers is intended to provide some short-term relief for certain customers, but also to help us collect information that would allow us to identify the best possible solutions and to then look at how we would roll those out for any customers who have these kinds of situations.
So if I could, Mr. Mayor, through you, you just mentioned short term. So we're going to spend $100,000 short term, and it's still not going to really fix the problem when we know maybe going from a 24-inch to a 36-inch pipe is the solution. I don't know. Maybe I'm not an engineer. I don't know that. But I think, we look short term. Yeah, we can fix the problem, but we should have known, and we should know, based on other areas in the city, what did we do? I'm trying to think of the other flood area that we've had an issue with, and that would be anywhere along Wascana Creek, I guess, if you go into Dieppe and along the streets in Dieppe. Have we had to fix sewer lines and do any of that kind of stuff there? Different grading maybe? I don't know. Adding more berms, putting on a 1,000-year flood zone berm. What else? What else can we do? Maybe the sewer lines are perfect. We just got to stop the water from coming in as fast as it does. I don't know. Maybe that's a solution too. And this $5,000. I would like to hear that administration has some answers. I'm hearing just possibles.
Is that a question?
Yeah, there's sort of a question in there.
Ms. Wilson, do you want to?
Sorry, I'm getting frustrated because this has gone on way too long.
Your Worship, in addition to the work on the wastewater system, we are in pre-design work, or will be going into pre-design work for the drainage in the area. I believe Ms. Silzer indicated that there are issues with drainage infiltrating into the wastewater system. It's very common for homes to have their weeping tile going into the storm or into the sewer, the domestic sewer, instead of into the storm sewer, which increases the issue for all of the other customers. So we are moving into pre-design work, and we do have funding that will be coming up for additional work on drainage solutions for the area that will also hopefully provide some relief.
And when are we talking about this happening?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, right now the funding for the pre-design is in the current budget, in the 2014 budget.
Okay.
The funding for the actual project work isn't until 2017. However, the timing on that work could be considered in the 2015 budget.
Okay, thank you. One more quick thing, and I want to know that whatever's happening with this particular report today, does it have an impact on the housing development that was approved last summer? To slow it down, stop it, put it on the shelf? I don't know.
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, because that's done under current standards, we were able to look at that to ensure that and apply higher standards upon that developer to ensure that they don't exacerbate any issues. So that this shouldn't impact that development because they're required to hold back some of their waste and dispose of it over time.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Councilor Flagle. Councilor Hawkins and Councilor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I share Councilor Flagle's frustration. I have two questions for the administration. The first is with respect to the automatic shutoff valve that's mentioned in the note that we received. Is that a solution that will work? What do we know about that solution, even as a temporary solution?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, that solution would not prevent the customer from being unable to flush at certain times. However, it would mean that she didn't have to go downstairs to operate her valve each time before leaving her house or when it was raining. Although, as she identified, there is risk around power supply. Likely there would be a need for battery backup or something like that. The issue right now is that, as she had indicated, we are unaware of where a supplier may be. However, we're looking into working with other cities that may have suppliers or be aware of possibilities.
Thank you. It sounds as even if we could find a supplier, it wouldn't be a very satisfactory solution. The back valve solution, or the solutions that would come out of the $5,000 grant, do we know if they would work at all, or how efficacious would they be?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, with any of these solutions, they are there to protect the basement from, or the home from backflow, but they would not prevent there from being those conditions that would put the home at risk. In order for any of these larger solutions, these large projects, improving the drainage system or potential twinning of the South Trunk or an expansion of the Wascana Trunk would have to be considered.
Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you. In one of the reports, I recall having read that you have a list of priorities for sewer fix-ups, and in the report that I read, I believe it said that this area was number 8 on that list. Am I right or am I wrong on that? And what is the priority being given to this particular problem before us today?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, the priority list that was provided was regarding the city's drainage master plan, which just looks at areas. So it looks at for an entire area. The overall rating is approximately 8 out of the 17 different areas. For any given area, there are going to be some hot spots, areas that have pieces of that area that have more trouble. So this is a higher impact area, or a situation that is more of a problem in this particular area.
Your Worship, I have one last question. Taking into account the fact that you wish to do further studies, and assuming that those studies indicate that this area is a hot spot of high priority, how quickly can we do the fixes, whatever they are, that need to be done to solve this problem?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, with regards to the drainage side of things, as I said, there's pre-design work that is going on this year. The anticipated budget amount for that drainage work isn't in the budget until 2017. However, we could review the priority of that work. It would have to be considered with all the other work that needs to be done. With regards to the wastewater system, the twinning of the second pressure zone, or sorry, twinning of the second, the South Trunk, that is currently anticipated for 2018 and 19. In the budget book, we have $9 million in each of 2018 and 19. And in order to move those up, there would have to be a great deal of work done on priorities to move those dollars forward.
Councilor Hawkins?
My only comment, Mr. Mayor, is that 2017 and 2018 and 2019 are simply too long to wait. I don't have the answers. I don't know what the money cost is, but I think that we really have to, as an administration and as a council, get our heads around this and get a solution to a problem that's gone on for 40 years and which is just totally unacceptable in terms of modern living conditions.
Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councilor Hawkins asked two of the questions that I had on my paper here. One is, if it's number 8, are there other areas in the city that are experiencing similar problems to this one, and we're just not hearing about them?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, again, as I said, the priority of 8 is with regards to the entire larger neighborhood. So some areas have a very spot problem. A small area is affected more seriously. So there are areas throughout the city that may be having those impacts, and any of the solutions we look at try to provide an overall benefit and take into account any specific situations that are especially problematic.
So would this program that you're offering the people in the Edward Street area to try to contain some of the issues they have until the larger fix can happen, are those same things being offered to people in other neighborhoods that have just as big a problem?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, this is a pilot program, so the intent is to gain information about what kinds of solutions we can apply. The work that we're doing through the summer of looking at the wastewater system overall is also intended to identify various locations that may be having these problems. Without that work, we simply aren't necessarily aware of every location that might have issues.
Do we have any assurance that the gate lock or that the other kinds of devices that we might be putting forward or that might come forward to help in the interim, is there any research that says this actually works?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, in most cases, backflow or backwater prevention valves are very effective. The gate valve, or the shutoff valve, is effective. The issue is primarily that it has to be operated, it has to be in place in order to provide that security for the customer.
And
so the fact that Mrs. Silzer has had things like this in place and is still experiencing the problem, I don't know whether you've talked with her at any length so that you know whether that's still going to be a problem for her.
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, I believe that when Ms. Silzer has had the shutoff valve engaged, it has held. She has expressed concerns about whether the system, whether all of those devices will hold over the long term. My understanding is that when that shutoff valve was operated, that it has held.
Are you talking about the shutoff valve or the gate valves that she's had to turn on and off?
It's one and the same.
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, that is the shutoff valve that I was referring to.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand why you need to have the bigger plan in place before you begin to determine how you're going to fix some of the areas that are under discussion here tonight. But I'm having trouble with the time frame, and Your Worship, I don't know whether we can suggest to the administration that they shorten those time frames or move it up, or do we have to wait for the next budget round to do that? What do we have available to us?
We are able to ask this to be referred to the 2015 budget process, if you'd like. We can ask for expedited review of that. The implications mean other projects move to the other side, and so we can ask for an implication, a report on what that means. But we can ask for an expedited report to come back and to review it earlier than 2018-19. Councilor Young?
So that would be the preference over actually taking money from the capital fund and doing some work on that trunk?
I don't know what that means yet. We have to ask for what that would mean for the administration.
Okay. I think I'd like to make that motion that it be considered in the referral, that it be considered in the 2015 budget. Would that be appropriate?
What do you want considered in the 2015 budget?
That work be done on the trunk and the size of the pipes and whatever's needed in that area, in that whole neighborhood area.
Okay. I need a seconder for that. Okay. Speakers to the amendment? I'd like to speak to the amendment if I could. You want to speak first, Councilor Bryce, and I'll speak after you do. Councilor Bryce?
Thank you. How long has the city known about this problem?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, I don't have specific information. However, as the delegations have indicated, the city has had some awareness for a significant amount of time.
50 years or so is a significant amount of time. So I find the 2018-2019 timeframe totally unacceptable to me. So I would like to see this done sooner rather than later. I know they're doing some preliminary work, but how quickly can this actually be done? If we made a decision here today, how quickly could this work be done?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, the indication in the report of needing 6 to 8 months in order to collect the information about what needs to be done or to get us ready to do pre-design work would still hold true. Then there would be pre-design, design, and delivery work. It is probably a 2-year project at least. So we would probably be talking about completion no sooner than the end of 2016.
As I said, they've waited over 50 years right now, and I just want to see this done sooner rather than later. So anything we can do to hurry that up is ideal for me.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Marie, on the amendment. Okay. The amendment, Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Quick question. What, maybe we know about this, what legalities, by doing what this amendment is going to say, because this land is on a floodplain, does that bring in the federal government? Does that bring in the provincial government? I'm asking, I don't know. I'm asking because it's not, it's a empty body of land, right?
I doubt it brings any federal or provincial together, but Mr. Carlson, do you have any comments on that, or?
Your Worship, I'm not familiar with what that might bring in. I'm not sure if Mr. Brown would be familiar.
Mr. Brown?
with that.
Mr. Worship, sorry, could you have the councillor repeat the question?
I'm wondering if, because it's a floodplain, is it governed by federal regulations, provincial, that might hamper us from doing anything out of the ordinary? I mean, when we go to put in 1,000-year buffers, do we have to get their approval? Because this is the water is not ours. Wascana Creek is not ours, right? It's provincial or federal, right? So if we're going to change the dynamic of it, are we going to run into a legal battle like 6 months into this and then have to stop it for 2 years? I just want to know that up front.
Mr. Brown?
Through you, Mr. Worship, well, in terms of areas around the floodplain and such, that would be a provincial jurisdiction. Ms. Wilson might have further comment, though, about where the work and what type of work would actually take place there.
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, if we were to change the flow of drainage and so on, then yes, we would have to work with the province. However, the work that we're discussing with regards to possible twinning of the trunk would not relate to that.
Okay. That's all I wanted to clarify. Thanks.
On the amendment, are the speakers? I'd like to speak, Councillor Hawkins, if you could take the chair.
Your Worship.
So the amendment is to expedite the building and changing of the work that needs to be done here. So I have a couple questions of Ms. Wilson, and that is the pre-design work being done now. When is expected to be completed?
Your Worship, the pre-design work for the drainage portion, I believe, is expected to be done this year. And then we typically do the work on drainage projects well ahead of time, and then we would have been looking to do that in 2017. With regards to the wastewater system, right now what we're doing is a calibration of the system, which has been ongoing work. When that information is collected, then we would be looking towards a pre-design for suitable options, which may be the twinning of the south trunk.
Assuming, make a couple of assumptions here for the sake of the discussion here. Assuming that the pre-design work is done this year, the motion put forward is that we move this project up to 2015. With the pre-design work being done in 2014, we start construction and alterations in 2015. How long could we expect this project to take, and when would it be completed? All things being equal, if council decided we wanted this to be a priority and to put it at the top of the list.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that it would be the better part of 2 years to complete a construction of this type. So between pre-design, design, and construction, I believe the end of 2016 would likely be the earliest we could complete.
So what is being constructed? We're looking at a larger trunk line. What else is being done over that 2-year period?
Your Worship, over that 2-year period, we could also be continuing to do work on the drainage system, as, again, that would require a change to the current budget plan.
I'm going to support the amendment. I'm glad that Councilor Young brought this forward. I think we need to deal with this issue in an expedited way. I think it's fairly clear that if the delegations and others, and I certainly want to thank the delegation for being very articulate, reasonable, but also very clear on their problems, that we do need to address those. And I understand the administration is trying to do that. I respect the report that came to Works and Utilities. Members of the Works and Utilities Committee did a great job of focusing on more immediate details, which is good. This council is now saying, I think, depending on the vote that takes place on the amendment, to move this forward on the list of priorities. There are 35 homes that are affected by this. And if I can take the example of Ms. Silzer saying this happens a lot, and I guess Ms. McKenzie as well, she doesn't live there, but she's worried about her friends, but certainly Ms. Silzer saying this happens frequently. This is certainly not acceptable. And we do need to look at this. I know there's other areas of the city where we're looking at changes to be made and trying to update our infrastructure. But to my mind, I'm satisfied by what I'm hearing. This is a major health issue. It's a major issue to be dealt with. So I will support the recommendation, particularly that we look at this issue in the 2015 budget year. That's our first window of opportunity to address the issue. It will give the administration time to understand the pre-design work and work further. So when we have a report coming for the 2015 budget year, which will start soon, we'll get a better understanding. So I will certainly very much support the amendment before us. Thank you. Other speakers on the amendment? Councilor Bryce, move to close debate. On the amendment, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. To the main motion as amended, Councilor Murray, and then Councilor Fraser.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Okay, so as a politician, I've often been told that I'm a bit of an expert in effluent. I would suggest
that's
that
a good
I'm
way
not.
to start your comments.
It is. Because I would suggest I'm probably not. Now, I've been around for a while, and I get that there's a venting issue. So, air behind water. Johnny knows what I'm talking about. If we want liquid to move, we have to have air behind it, so therefore we have to have ventilation to our sewage system. Therefore, you have to have a backflow prevention valve that's normally open. My question is, as a stopgap measure to protect these 35 homes, can we have them switched to a normally closed backflow prevention valve? I get it, it's not going to be vented now, but we're talking 35 homes. On that system, could that be a short-term stopgap measure? I appreciate it's not going to solve everything, but it definitely can't hurt. We've already understood from the presentation that that means that the sewer line is closed until something passes. It opens, passes through, goes into the city side, and closes again. What would happen if those backflow prevention valves, which can be outfitted with a normally closed, can we do that?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, the National Plumbing Code limits how these valves can be used. In order to use them, there has to be alternate venting. So the options are to install a vent before the main sewer, which in most already constructed houses is just not feasible. It would have to be before any branching happens in the basement and would likely put it into essentially the foundation of the home. So that's probably not feasible in most existing construction. The other option is what Ms. Silzer has already done, which is to install a normally closed valve on each branch within the basement. That may be a solution for some other customers, depending on the amount of pressure that they're experiencing, the amount of backflow, although Ms. Silzer has not found it to be fully effective.
Councilor Murray?
So again, I appreciate that in one example it may not always work, and I get that. But so building code says that it has to be vented from the stack, or that you have another venting source. If the front yard was dug up and there was a line teed in the front yard, which most of us, if you have a newer home, you'll know that, or if you've had your sewer replaced in an older neighborhood, that they'll bring up a clean out. Basically, it's a vent in your front yard. Johnny, is that what it's called? It's a clean out, it's a vent? Okay, so that's the pipe in your front yard next to your water shutoff valve. Don't pay your bill, city shuts off your water. Right next to that is your sewer hole. So that would then constitute a vent, correct?
Ms. Wilson?
Your worship, unfortunately, the vent does have to be inside the home, according to National Plumbing Code.
So the rules get in the way of trying to come up with a quick solution here to try to avoid having a basement filled up with sewage.
What the rules are.
Makes you wonder sometimes if it's okay to break the rules just a little bit, so you don't have to.
You don't want to say that.
Scoop sewage out. I get that. I
You don't
appreciate
really
that.
want to say that.
I'm a politician. I'm really good with effluent. I know. Okay, so are some of those sewer person holes, because I can't say manholes, person holes, those down the middle of the street, the person holes in the middle, that's where people have access to go in there and check when our staff have to go in there. Are those manhole covers exposed to rainwater or to flood conditions when these situations occur?
Ms. Wilson?
Your worship, yes, they are.
Okay, so now those manhole covers have little perforation, little holes in them to vent them. If they were changed to a manhole cover that didn't have little holes in it, so had a gasket on there and stopped the intrusion of water, could that help take some of the pressure off of this? Again, I'm looking for a quick solution, a quick win right now. Is there a way we could do that?
Ms. Wilson, this will be the last question in this line of reasoning, because we can't really solve the problem in the floor council. We can refer issues to the administration to evaluate. Councilor Murray, we'll be here for a long time doing this.
I get it. I got only
Let
one
the
after this.
administration
So.
do the work.
Yeah, I got one more after this, so then that'll be done.
Your worship, I believe that it would not make a material difference. There are a number of other sources, and it would not meet our current spec.
Okay. My final question then, Your Worship, would be, is it possible to put in some type of holding vessel at the end that could have a lift station put into it so that we could collect that high volume that's happening during those periods of time and then store it until there's such time that we could use the lift station? Is that another option that would be explored or looked at?
Ms. Wilson?
Your worship, effectively that is one of the options that was provided that was not recommended, primarily because it is a relatively high cost. It doesn't fully resolve the issue. The longer-term solution of looking at our trunks is, we believe, the best place to spend the money.
Councilor Murray?
Well, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Ms. Wilson, for your help on that. I guess I really feel for these folks dealing with a pretty poopy situation. Thanks, Worship.
Thank you for the colorful commentary. Councilor Fraser?
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to our presenters here tonight. One of the points that really resonated with me is that this the subsidy program, which of course is a temporary fix, but of course the longer-term fix can't happen, like I say, this month. One of the points that resonates with me is that it's not retroactive. So somehow we're punishing people that have tried to help themselves already. I'm not actually sure how we would make this retroactive, but one thing I would like to suggest is an amendment that right now it reads that the subsidy program is worth 60% of all of the total cost up to $3,000. I'd like to make an amendment that we actually pay 100%, still only up to $3,000, so it wouldn't change the total cost of the program to the city. But for people that have maybe done some of the work already, it sort of levels the playing field. So there's two parts to this amendment. One is that in Appendix B, under extensive repair, we change 60% up to $3,000 to 100% up to $3,000. And along with that, as part of the criteria, because it was, right now it's written as a cost share, we don't require quotes. Because we would be taking on all of the cost, I would also suggest that under criteria that people that submit to this program have to submit 3 quotes.
I need a seconder for the amendment.
I'll second it.
Seconded, okay. Further comments on the amendment? Councilor Fraser? He does it, okay. Other comments? Councilor Bryce?
My understanding is that most of these residents have already put in these devices and these temporary fixes that haven't really fixed anything because of pressure issues as well as other issues. Can I just get a comment? I know we brought up the retroactive thing at Public Works, and Ms. Wilson said it's something they hadn't thought about. Have you thought about it, through you, Mr. Mayor? And what kind of resolution did you come to?
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, yes, we have given consideration to it. A very substantial portion of this is in order for us to gain information about these devices. We feel that it would be quite feasible to allow this retroactively, provided that the device, that the individual can provide bills, and that the appropriate building permits have been drawn for these kinds of situations, what would be required for any new installation. And we do feel that this would be feasible.
Thank you. I just feel that otherwise that $100,000 would almost be a waste of money, because people have tried just about everything to get this come to a solution for this problem. And I just think that we need to be retroactive with it. And I agree, we should pay up to $3,000, whether it's 60% or 100%. So,
Speaking in favor of the amendment, other speakers for the amendment? And we're clear what the amendment is? To the clerk? What's that? No, not yet. I'll call a question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Fraser, you still have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So back to the main motion. It was mentioned by Council earlier that this is a separate issue from the bill that we talked about last year. I'd like to say first off that in one sense it is. You know, the issue of flooding, it's not that 100 people have a shower at the same time. You know, the big flooding issue that we have is from a shower across the city, you know, all that water all at once. So I think somehow the new build on 23 block of Edwards isn't directly related, but also we have to appreciate that somehow it is related. The reason we're talking about this here today is because last fall we spent many hours in this chamber talking about this new build, and part of how we were, you know, part of how we dealt with some of the legitimate neighborhood complaints was to address this looming sewer issue. We have three options before us in this report. Option one is worth $4.3 million. Option two is worth $3 million. These really seem like big numbers, you know, when we're only talking about really a handful of houses, when, you know, our city has something like 60,000 different residents. We also have to appreciate that the report done by the city, the Reed-Crawford report in 1999, looked at the insurance implications of flooding damage in Area 11, and it said over 100 years, you know, they average out 1 in 5-year floods, 1 in 10-year floods, 1 in 20-year floods, 1 in 50-year floods, 1 in 100-year floods. And the estimate was that the insurance implications through flooding in Section 11 is over $20 million over 100 years. So discounted at 6% back to $1999, that means $3.5 million. You know, and that's in 1999. So actually, the cost of us doing nothing somehow, you know, I'm not sure what a $1999 is worth now, 15 years later, but certainly it's more than the $4.3 million that it would cost the city to do option one. So somehow as a liability right now that lies with individuals in the neighborhoods, and I think in that sense we do need to deal, you know, the reason we're talking about this now is because a potential new build on 23 block Edward Street, and really this is the city's responsibility to deal with. Finally, I'll just like to say that the big number we use is $2 billion. Oftentimes, you know, we hear mention of that the infrastructure deficit of the city is $2 billion. You know, that's nine zeros, 2,000 million, you know, and that's a big number, and we actually have to deal with that eventually. You know, like eventually the work that we're talking about doing here, this main trunk work, it's not that it can never be done. It's been deferred, you know, some of it rightfully, some of it not rightfully over years and years. But eventually that's money that if it's not this council, some future council is going to have to pay for. You know, you can only put patches on top of patches so long. So I'm optimistic that one of our amendments was to deal with this in 2015, but I think we need to be committed to actually try to find the big fix for this one next year's budget. So I look forward to supporting the.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Are there speakers? I believe we had all speakers on the main motion. For closing debate, Councilor Bryce. And Councilor Bryce, I'm sure you're going to talk about the retroactive aspect of this as well. I'm sure you'll do that.
I am. I just want to know, do we need a motion to make it retroactive?
It's not retroactive as the motion was just passed. It was only for the current one. It was not retroactive. That's what I suggested.
So I would like to move a motion to make this dollar value
the program
with the dollar value attached retroactive to the residents in this area who've already put up.
I'll second that.
Seconded.
And I've spoken lots about that, so
Okay, so any comments on the amendment, which is to make it retroactive to the 35 homes in the affected area? Councilor Fraser.
Thanks to you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, how do we actually do that exactly? Is there still a receipt needs to be submitted, or what's the process?
Ms. Wilson, I'm sure she's figured it out. She mentioned it was possible.
Sure.
Ms. Wilson?
Your Worship, we would be providing information to the eligible properties indicating how they can apply for this program, and we would be asking them, if it was for retroactive installation, to provide proof of payment and copy of, we can get the copies of building permits here, so we can follow up from here.
Okay, thanks for that. And just to note that as the bylaw reads, or as the criteria reads right now, the device needs to be CSA approved. That's the criteria, right? So it has to follow National Building Code. It's not specific necessarily to this one device we've seen, but as long as it meets National Code, to me that seems reasonable.
It has to be CSA approved.
Yeah.
No question. Okay, other comments on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Bryce, still closing the debate. You have about 2 minutes to go.
Oh, okay.
On the closing debate.
And actually, most of what I've wanted to say has been said. I may have said it in a little bit more of a forceful manner, as we did at Public Works, but I will end this debate with this comment. These residents have been paying for a service that they haven't been getting. We as a city have been ripping them off. We need to right that. So I think that doing the right thing, bringing this forward, getting it dealt with as soon as possible is the right thing.
I don't think we could say that ripping them off is a fair comment. I think that we need to fix what's happened in the past, but that is a bit strong. I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move on to our next delegation. That would be Lisa Gibbons, D14-34. If you could identify yourself, who you represent, your guest as well. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Lisa Gibbons, Manager of Marketing Communications for Regina Downtown, and Judith Verisek is with me, Executive Director. Good evening, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come and address you today on behalf of Regina Downtown Business Improvement District regarding the mobile food vending regulations. We are here to demonstrate our support for the proposed amendments to the Clean Property Bylaw with respect to mobile food vending. The report before you summarizes the results of the mobile food vending pilot project, which has now come to a close. Over the past 2 summers, the plaza has come alive during lunch hours as people visited the food trucks and enjoyed their lunches in the park and plaza. The vibrancy and vitality of the plaza was evident to all who walked through the plaza during these times. It was truly a success. It is this success that we want to continue as downtown continues to grow and expand. In order to support the use of the plaza and our downtown streets for mobile vending units and to support the vendors as they service the downtown community on a daily basis, the RD bid has proposed each vendor become a special member of the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. The cost of this membership would be $250, which goes towards additional services that RD bid would provide on the plaza. These services include, but are not limited to, additional maintenance in the plaza and park during lunch hours, opportunities for vendors, vendor participation in RD bid events held on the plaza at no extra charge, listing on the RD bid website and other promotional publications, promotion at our mobile kiosk, inclusion in our Twitter and Facebook efforts, any capital purchases that would support the plaza during lunch hours. Those things could be Adirondack chairs, various temporary seating things that we put in there. Daily setup of additional tables and chairs in the park. On Wednesday, March 19th, we invited all the mobile vendors to come down for an information session. In attendance were Prairie Smoke, Ogie Pierogi, Sassy Cafe, and Bud's Burgers. Feedback from the group was very positive, and they are looking forward to becoming members of Regina Downtown. As you can see, RD Bid is committed to the success of City Square and the mobile food vendors. As additional opportunities for RD Bid to support and partner with the mobile food vendors arise, we'll be happy to explore them further. In closing, RD Bid respectfully requests that the addition to the Clean Property Bylaw be approved as presented, based upon the city's desire to establish the City Square as a cultural hub and gathering space for the community. Ongoing active use on the plaza by mobile vendors will be essential. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Givens, for the work you do, and Ms. Versick for the work you do for Regina Downtown. Great work. Any questions of the delegation? Pretty clear what you want. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll consider the report. Councilor Bryce on 14-30.
Thank you. I'll bring forward CR 14-29, which is the addition to the Clean Property Bylaw number 9881. So my eyes are getting bad. Schedule K, mobile food vending regulations. Number 1, that Schedule K, with respect for mobile food vending regulations, be added to the Clean Property Act, number 9881, as referred to in Appendix A, attached, and that the city solicitor prepare the necessary bylaw documentation.
Comments on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next delegation is Curtis West. Mr. West, if you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. And members of council may have questions after.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, or good evening, Your Worship, and City of Regina councillors. My name is Curtis West, General Manager of Loris Disposal. Although Loris Disposal agrees with the direction that the City of Regina is heading as it relates to mandating multi-family property recycling, I am here today to speak about the negative consequences for our customers if the City mandates that glass be accepted through this new program. Loris Disposal has been operating in Regina for over 40 years. We are very proud of the reputation and market share that we have developed, not only because of the high level of service that we provide, but also because of our support of this community. Loris Disposal has been offering and promoting recycling services in the City of Regina for nearly 30 years. We have been the sole service provider for the Big Blue Bin program in Regina since its inception in 1991. In fact, Loris Disposal contributed to the design of the containers for use in the Big Blue Bin program and initiated the introduction of paper and cardboard compactors to lessen the city's costs. In addition to the hundreds of commercial, institutional, and residential recycling customers that we have developed over the past 30 years, in 2013, Loris Disposal was awarded the contract to collect recycling material from every home in Regina for the new residential recycling program. Today, we look forward to working with Regina's apartment and condo owners as we satisfy their recycling needs. Although the City of Regina and all of Saskatchewan may be a little behind in terms of mandatory recycling programs for citizens, we commend the City's administration and City Council for the large strides taken over the past few years. However, as the City moves forward with the next phase of Waste Plan Regina, specifically multifamily recycling, I am concerned that this program, because of the requirement to accept glass, will significantly and negatively impact thousands of our customers. Loris Disposal, in conjunction with Crown Shred and Recycling, introduced single-stream recycling in the City of Regina in August of 2012. Loris Disposal currently provides single-stream recycling services to well over 100 multifamily dwellings in the City of Regina and residential recycling services to well over 10,000 homes outside the City of Regina. Unlike the City of Regina's current residential recycling program, our program does not allow glass, but does accept plastic bags and styrofoam. Prior to introducing single-stream recycling in Regina, we canvassed our customers as it relates to their preference to have either glass or plastic bags and styrofoam as acceptable forms of material in the recycling program. Customers understood that because of processing costs, having all materials accepted was not an option. Overwhelmingly, our customers stated that they prefer to be able to recycle plastic bags and styrofoam. Our customers will not accept a price increase for our single-stream recycling service, especially if the only added benefit is the acceptance of glass. If glass is mandated through this report, we will be at a cost disadvantage with our competitors. Our only option to keep costs as they are will be to eliminate plastic bags and styrofoam from our list of acceptable materials, a major step backwards for any recycling program. I can understand the city's desire to have consistency between the residential and multifamily recycling programs. However, I believe that by allowing our program to remain as is, a higher level of recycling service can occur. Furthermore, differences will already exist between the residential and multifamily dwelling programs if the multi-dwelling program is implemented as is. Some of these differences include, number one, the method of billing, 2, container type and how the service is delivered, 3, option as to which company provides the service, 4, number of families using each container, 5, the frequency of collection. I can also appreciate the city's desire to have recycled glass included when calculating the total weight of material diverted from the landfill. However, I believe the impact that various products may have on the environment and the volume of material diverted should be of greater concern than reaching diversion targets based on the weight of material. Other factors that make the recycling of plastic bags and styrofoam more worthwhile than glass include the following. 1, while marketing glass is difficult at best, there are markets for both plastic bags and styrofoam once processed, processing that occurs locally in Regina at Crown Shred and Recycling. Excuse me. Although glass, plastic, and styrofoam are all products that will not decompose in our lifetime, if landfilled, glass is essentially sand, soda ash, and limestone. Therefore, if landfilled, these products would have less of a negative impact on the earth when compared to the petroleum-based products that plastic bags and styrofoam are composed of. 3, plastic bags and styrofoam are lighter than glass and therefore is often the material you can see blowing around the City of Regina landfill and in our ditches. 4, there will be a potential cost savings to the City of Regina as there will be less money spent on cleaning up lands adjacent to the landfill. 5, while cities around the world are banning the use of plastic bags, Regina has the opportunity to have them recycled opposed to having them end up in the landfill. Your Worship and City Councilors, at your homes, whether a single unit or a multi-family dwelling, which would you prefer to have recycled and kept out of our landfills? Plastic bags and styrofoam or glass? Our recommendation is to change the report Waste Plan Regina, Multifamily Recycling, recommendation number 1, bullet point 3, from stipulate recyclable materials to be at a minimum the same as available through the single-family curbside recycling program. Change to, with the exception of glass, stipulate recyclable materials to be at a minimum the same as available through the single-family curbside recycling program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. West, for your presentation. Questions from members of council? Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. When I went to the city recycling program from the single residential program which you run, I was concerned about plastic bags, but I found that I could take them to Safeway, for instance. And so my question for you is, do the bags from those supermarkets that collect them, do they go to you? Do those plastic bags that are collected in supermarkets come to you for recycling?
Yes, we collect them through multifamily dwelling recycling and from commercial businesses. We're not a processor, we're only a hauler, so we would collect containers, materials, and haul them through a processor. Crown Shred and Recycling accepts the plastic bags.
Okay.
In terms of grocery stores collecting plastic bags, I don't know where that destination is.
So it doesn't go to you? Okay.
Correct.
All right. Styrofoam. You have a market for styrofoam.
Again, we're not the processor, we're the hauler, but our processing company, which is Crown Shred and Recycling, is accepting styrofoam, and therefore I assume he has a market for it once it's assumed.
Okay, thank you.
Or, excuse me, once it's processed.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Councilor Fundura?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. West. So what's happening with the glass now, to your Worship? Where is the glass now? Like if someone, I know that years back, Crown Shred had a depot where you can go and drop off glass. I do remember doing that way back a few years ago. So what happened to that?
Currently, our program of single-stream recycling does not have glass as an accepted material. Through the residential single-family unit program, glass is accepted. I'm not sure what is occurring with that glass currently, you would have to ask administration that question. There is an outlet for glass at the City of Regina landfill still today.
Okay, and you mentioned to your worship is that the glass is sand. So if it ends up at the landfill, it just goes into the ground, correct?
I would think it's less harmful than styrofoam or plastic bags.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ventura. Councilor Bryce.
Thank you. Thank you for coming forward. We had a representation from Crown Shred at Public Works, and he stated, and obviously you work with them, you've mentioned them a few times in your submission, so he mentioned that he would take glass if absolutely necessary.
Correct, and because of his presentation at Public Works, that raised our interest, because although he would take, as you mentioned, glass if he had to, it's our customers that are going to be affected. It's our program that we've been promoting for about 2 years, over 2 years now, and it's our customers that will incur a price increase, because although Crown Shred and Recycling will accept glass if they have to, the rates will go up because of it. We won't be able to continue to accept these other products because of that rate increase. It'll put us at a cost disadvantage with competitors.
Okay. So you also mentioned in your presentation you understand the want of the city to have that continuity between single-family dwelling versus multi-household. So why would we have it different for one than the other then? And I note that you did mention some of the differences already, but
we've had a program in place for 2 years. We've spent considerable dollars on promoting that service. It's going to be, it's a negative for us to have to go backwards, and we will have to eliminate some of our accepted products if our rates go up through our processing company. Because the program is already in place, I'm hoping that the city will choose to leave it as is. There are numerous differences between the residential and the multifamily dwelling programs. This would simply be one additional difference.
so if the homeowners say yes to plastic bags and yes to, that's what we require, plastic bags and glass, you're saying you could only do one or the other?
Because of costs, if our competitors, through different processing companies, were to only accept glass, they would be able to do it at a lesser cost because there would be less equipment and labor necessary at the processing facilities. If we have a higher, most of the market is price sensitive. If we have a higher rate for our services, we are not likely to achieve numbers that we will want to see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Any other questions? Just a question on the competitive advantage, disadvantage of collecting glass. Would not every other potential competitor have to pick up glass as well, so their costs may change as well?
That's correct. The advantage for the competitor is that they do not have to collect styrofoam or plastic bags.
I see. Okay, good. Thank you for that. There's no other comments or questions from from the council. You can return to the gallery and we'll consider the report. Councilor Bryce on report 14-30.
Thank you. I'll bring forward CR 14-30, which is Waste Plan Regina Phase 2, multifamily recycling. I will move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Questions on the report? I have one of the administration. When we began designing Phase 2 for the multifamily recycling, did we consult with the industry about what to pick up, what not to pick up, and did this issue come up of glass or styrofoam and plastic? Mr. Vanendort?
Your Worship, I will refer that question to the Director of Open Space and Environmental Services.
Your Worship, yes, during the Waste Plan Regina consultation, a review of acceptable materials was made, and then the procurement to move forward with the processing facility was to include the materials that were recommended through the Waste Plan Regina.
Thank you, Ms. Legault. Other questions or comments on the report? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious as to why we don't collect styrofoam, and is there a plan to do that in the future?
Ms. Legault or Mr. Vanendort? Mr. Vanendort.
Your Worship, the list of recyclable materials, I guess, was developed when Waste Plan Regina was developed over a few years ago. And at that time, through consultation, basically a list was developed, and that's what we sort of went out to tender with in terms of the service being provided. So that's not to say that over time going forward we couldn't review the list, but currently we're working from the list that was established when Waste Plan Regina was developed.
Are there any plans to review that list in the future and perhaps add to it as time goes on?
Mr. Vanendort.
There are Your Worship, there are no specific plans to review it, but it certainly would be something that we would be looking at doing going forward. Markets change, conditions change, so it only makes sense that we would sort of evaluate the list of recyclable materials over a period of time. I mean, I will say that we're aware that the market for glass isn't strong. On the other hand, recycling glass is not unique to Regina. It's recycled in most municipalities that have a program, so it's not an unusual thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other questions? Call the question on the report, then all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. On to our next report.
Your Worship, can I just maybe float the idea of a recess for a few minutes?
You could do that. A motion for recess for 10 minutes?
Sure.
Seconder for all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Back here at 25 after 8.
really great from all.
That would be even more terrifying.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
I don't have enough medication.
glasses left. Yeah, just over there. Right. I'm sure the students are. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Anyway, I'm anxiously looking forward to it. Okay. Which I may have heard before. Yeah, sure.
Order. I would ask everyone to take their seats, and we will reconvene the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, for bringing us back to order. We're now looking at exemptions for, which will ultimately be for Finance Administration's CR 14-31. Councilor Young?
Yes. I am going to declare a conflict of interest because I sit on the Food Bank Board of Directors.
And I, too, will declare a conflict because I in my previous time with the Saskatchewan Construction Association, was a founder of the Regina Skill and Trade Center, and they are receiving an exemption tonight, so I recuse myself from that as well. So, Councillor Hawkins, will you take the chair, please?
Mr. Chair, I'll move receive and file for communication 14-3.
Thank you. I don't need a second for that. So moved.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. No delegation. Okay. I understand there's a delegation that isn't present. Would you come forward, please? State your name. Thank you. Would you please state your name and who you represent?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, for being out of order. My name is Riley Bellon, and I am here on behalf of Chad Novak.
Thank you very much. You have 10 minutes.
Good evening, members of City Council and senior administration. My name is Arden Bellon, and Riley Bellon, and I'm here to represent the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, a truly grassroots group of individuals from Saskatchewan that are pushing for accountability and transparency from the municipal governments. You can find more information about our goals at our website, Chad for Regina, at chadforregina.com. I'm here to address the recommendation before you today regarding the property tax exemptions for a number of organizations throughout Regina. First off, I would like to say that we are very much in support of providing financial assistance to any agency or nonprofit that is able to provide any valuable community resource that contributes to our overall social well-being. Without agencies like this, we are confident that it would be far more difficult to attract and retain the great citizens in our community, since these organizations provide a quality of life for them in one form or another. We note that there are organizations that most certainly could not exist without the assistance from governments, grants, and property tax exemptions, while there are others that simply receive a tax break just because that's how it's been done for years. We are most certainly not fans of the idea, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because it can lead to complacency and apathy. A perfect example of this is the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. While we recognize the economic benefit that a provincial sports team brings to any community, we simply do not feel that tax breaks should be given to help them out, especially one as profitable as the Rough Riders have been in the recent years. Also, one must keep in mind that the only community benefit a professional sports team is entertainment. Sure, the Rough Riders organization gives back to our communities through a variety of ways. It is great, but most certainly not in the requirement of the lease in Taylor Field, and thus one must look only at the facts of the situation. We strongly believe that the government should treat everyone fairly and equally. This goes to all individuals and corporations, whether they make $1 or $1 billion. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and with consistency. It is this statement that we feel strongly to the City of Regina needs to take a step back from their proposed property tax exemptions and to reevaluate each and every organization that is currently on the annual and 5-year tax exemption list, and also reconsider those that have applied and have been refused in the past. We have a few concerns that regarding these exemptions before you tonight, and it is our hope that concerns can be addressed to the tax-paying citizens of Regina before any final approval has been given. These concerns cannot be addressed this evening. If these concerns cannot be addressed this evening, then we encourage you to table this to future meeting until they can be addressed. What is interesting is how in one breath this evening, the taxpayers of Regina are being told that the organizations are so great for our community that they deserve to have $2.5 million in property tax exemptions, while at the same time there are individual taxpayers that are being told even though they've been paying tax property for decades, they must foot the bill to have their own sidewalks replaced in front of their homes. What is worse is how these taxpayers have been treated over the years. First off, the city has known about these crumbling roads and sidewalks for a number of years, and in one instance have actually tried billing residents in 2010 for the exact same work that is being proposed in 2014. In 2010, residents have successfully petitioned against it. Again in 2014, it would appear they have once again successfully petitioned against the work. This is great to see such active citizen engagement. It bothers us immensely, though, that the city cannot cough up a whopping $500,000 for this work, and simply outright refuses to do anything more than what's vital because of the taxpayers don't want to pay $10,000 each for a necessity and a long overdue work. How on earth is this fair and equitable treatment for all taxpayers in the City of Regina? And before you suggest the Local Improvement Act requires the city to charge taxpayers for this work, I would highly suggest you reread the act if you actually believe that's what it says. Now, we can all agree that the goal of property tax exemptions should be to reduce the financial burden on organizations that require it. It should be noted that the City of Regina actually has established a policy that is proposed to be used in this process. The policy was created through the former Regina Economic Developmental Agency and appears to still be active policy to this very day. With the limited information provided to the public, it is not clear if any of the exemptions you tonight will actually be considered through existing policy or if factors were considered to be determined if they should be approved. The policy, which is currently outlined on the Regina Regional Opportunities Commission, RROC website, specifically states that they are to be the first point of contact for any property tax exemption request, and they are to evaluate each request based on the variety of predetermined criteria. In this policy, it specifically states that the RROC would handle requests all the way through, putting it to the recommendation through City Council. Now, we could see this as a mere oversight for the average taxpayer, but given the close relationship of these organizations with the City of Regina, one would reasonably expect this protocol to be very well known. Thus raises some serious questions as to the fairness of these requests. If in fact these requests did go through the RROC, then certainly you shouldn't have a problem with providing this information to the general public, including how each organization placed on the evaluation matrix, which determines how much of a tax exemption an organization would get and for how long. Through our research, we did find it quite interesting that Saskatchewan is the only province that actually provides their municipalities to grant authority to grant tax exemptions on a case-by-case basis. To its credit, this does allow municipalities to set up their own guidelines in order to, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. To its credit, this does allow municipalities to set up their own guidelines in order to, in theory, attract more business, investment, to offering further incentives to set up shop. Through this very same research, however, we found that we are extremely competitive tax-wise, even before any property tax exemption. One certainly has to wonder if this is even a needed incentive to bring business investment into our current booming economy. We continue to hear how there's so much money that the City Hall has to go around, and as such, it would seem that you would want to maximize every tax dollar you have access to. With that said, it would not be the taxpayer's best interest to keep a very close eye on what the property tax exemptions are provided and ensure with their original request qualifications continue through their given exemption break. We saw what can happen when you don't monitor this in recent situation surrounding the District Brewing Company, and where they pretty much reconstructed an entire building that was previously exempt before it was noticed. Unfortunately, the tax exemption was only caught very late in the process when they applied for the permit. This is a real concern and leads to wonder just how many tax dollars are left on the table, with these exemptions going virtually unnoticed. Thank you for your time, and I now will welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, delegation. Does council have any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming forward. We appreciate your time. We'll now move forward to consider CR 14-31, Finance and Administration Committee. I'm sorry. Councillor Fraser, did you have a question for the delegation?
Actually, it's to do with the report. I must apologize. What's listed as the Regina Plains Museum here is actually the Regina Civic Museum, and I'm the council liaison for that, so I should declare myself
Thank you.
conflict of interest too. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Chair.
Murray.
I do rise to bring forward CR 1431, and this is the annual property tax exemption 2014. There's a couple of motions that came forward from the Finance Administration Committee at our March 4th meeting, and I'd like to add an amendment to that. With the letter that we saw that was received earlier from the Rough Riders organization, I'd like to make an amendment, so I guess it would be a number 2. So number 1, that City Council approve property tax exemptions outlined in Appendix A, but there's going to be a number 2 in there that we remove the Saskatchewan Rough Riders from that list for this year, for 2014.
So I'll accept that as an amendment. Do we have a seconder for that amendment?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. The amendment's on the floor. Would you like to address the amendment?
Sure. I'll just briefly speak to that. Through a conversation, obviously, that's taken place between the Rough Riders, we found that what was in place for a number of years may not be as necessary today, and so therefore we've asked that we remove them from it. So pretty straightforward in that way.
Thank you very much. Any councillors wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Flego.
Just clarify this, it's not the whole amount, it's only
It would be the whole
42.
amount. It would
It's
be
only
the whole.
42,000, not 50,
It would be the whole.
the whole amount?
Correct.
Councillor Flego, I understand the amendment is to be for the whole amount. The letter doesn't reference the whole amount, but the amendment is for the whole amount.
Okay, I'm going to just ask, is there a reason why we're doing more than what they're asking? Because they're asking for only 42,000 as opposed to the whole, right? Am I correct on that?
For a second building, for part of a second building.
Well, Councillor Flego, Councillor Murray will conclude the debate. Perhaps he can answer the question at that time unless it's answered
Okay.
prior to that.
3 locations, and it includes an exemption of 42,000 for the lease, 39,000 for property at Elphinstone Street, and 8637 for the other 2 strips of land. Now, my understanding is those are over and above the 42,000. Is that, so then it's going to be an exemption of like 53.
The motion, and council should correct me if I have this wrong, the motion is that there would be no exemption
No,
for the
that's what
Rough
I
Rider
mean.
organization.
We're going to, they're going to pay the whole amount? Okay, I'm fine. Okay,
Thank you. Any other comment or question from council on the amendment? Everybody understand the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Motion passed. Councilor Murray, I understand you have a second amendment?
I do have a second amendment, so I guess that would become a number 3 that would be here, and that is that, and I'll ask the clerk to help to massage the wording a little bit, but that there be a review of the current tax exemption policy for all those that are listed within Appendix A, and so again, we have a little bit of a history to that, and how did we get where we are today? So I guess I'm looking for some wording on that would take us essentially to review the current policy the way it is today.
Mr. Clerk, do you have any, do you understand the amendment that's being proposed and have any comments on the wording?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I actually think, Councillor Murray, I think your wording is relatively close to what we would end up with. I was just quickly writing down here that there be a review of the current tax exemption policy and those parties identified in Appendix A, and review their review the efficacy of those on an ongoing basis, something to that effect.
I wonder if I can ask the administration whether it's clear what the amendment is asking.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, that is clear, and we would undertake that this year, for sure.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess we would need a seconder then, if I can ask for one.
I'll second that.
There's a seconder for the motion. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just briefly, if I could, there's a wide variety of organizations and groups who are on this Appendix A list, and of course you can find that on our agenda or on the city's website. But it's important to understand that some of them are there by provincial statute or by another reason that they're there. As an example would be libraries or schools and that kind of things. They're under different rules, so churches, places of worship. But again, I'm asking that the entire list be reviewed, so we look at the policy that's there before us, and that would be the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Is there any further questions or discussions on the motion? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's just a point of clarification. In the delegation, they mentioned there was the role of the Regina Opportunities Corporation for bringing forward recommendations on which organizations were allowed tax exemption. It was my understanding that they focused only kind of on economic development-related initiatives, that they could offer up to a 5-year grant to encourage economic development. They don't have the authority to kind of add and delete all these others, do they?
Is there anyone from the administration that would like to comment? Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, that is correct, that it is that the regional economic arm does look at just spurring on new economic development. And Mr. Barr, I think, has some additional context to add.
Mr. Barr?
Through the role of ROC was strictly in the economic development, and that has been under review and discussions with ROC and considering the current economic climate, and we're in the process of reviewing the criteria that they have on their website and they have in their policy right now.
Thank you very much.
No, I certainly support the review. I was just wanting clarification. Just one other quick question. In terms of kind of, I understand the need to support certain organizations financially, and a tax incentive or tax break is certainly one way, but we do have other kind of community grant programs. Would it be the preference of administration to move people more into a granting program as opposed to using the tax credit?
Any comment from the administration on that question?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, that is true. Given the current adjustments and policy amendments by Council to the community investment grants, we have been trying to direct many of these groups to go that route, although still we receive the occasional request regarding taxation. So some of the review that we'll do this year in assessing the current receivers of this exemption, we'd also look at policy to address future requests.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from Council? Mr. Murray?
Just to close debate, appreciate the opportunity for us to have a better review, just so that as we go forward, we're being very judicious with every dollar that taxpayers invest with us. And so I guess that would be number 3, and I will have a fourth when we're finished.
Thank you very much. Just before we vote on this, I wonder if I might ask the administration one question. How much time do you think you'd need to develop this review?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think I'd look to Mr. Barr on that one.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's in our work plans for 2014. We're anticipating we'd have that completed in the fall.
Thank you very much. Further questions, comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. Opposed? Motion carried. And now back to the main motion.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So there would be a number 4 then, which would replace number 2 that's here, and that's the city solicitor be instructed to bring forward the necessary bylaw to provide for the tax exemptions listed in Appendix A, with the addition of the deletion of number 2, which would be the Rough Riders.
Thank you
that
very
would be the modified number 4.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether we need to vote on that. It follows automatically, but just to be clear, is there a seconder for that?
I don't know if we have to second it, or we're just
you're
not
the chair,
materially changing it, but it's simply just that we need to itemize that Appendix A is now changed with the deletion of that one group.
Thank you. The clerk has a clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd like to check with the city solicitor with respect to the bylaw. There was proposed consideration for the bylaw later on the agenda. It is now my understanding that we will table that pending what we were just discussing with respect to the removal of the...
That's correct, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We'll require some additional time to edit the bylaw
And I understand from consulting with Mr. Barr that that shouldn't interfere with the time frame for having this approved and implemented.
Good, so we won't deal with the bylaw this evening. Thank you very much for that clarification. Anything else on this? Hearing none, I'll put the question on the main motion. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. We can ask the absent councillors and the mayor to return.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I guess we'll move on to the next delegation, D14-37, Mr. Greg Argue. Mr. Argue, if you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
My name is Greg Argue, and I guess I'm representing myself at this point. First of all, I'd like to commend the City Council for seeking to more clearly understand how advisory committees are important to the future of our city. What is the policy challenge and opportunity with respect to the committee review? It is not clear from the recommendation. Is a challenge one of general citizen engagement? First, in our system, there is an absence of political parties and what they provide elected officials at the municipal government level. Secondly, clarity, transparency, and openness are the lifeblood of small p political decision-making and advice. In this partisan void and governance opportunity, advisory committees provide an important conduit for information, advice, and action between residents and their elected council. I would like to provide some questions and thoughts for council's consideration as it studies this issue further. First, what would council like these committees to achieve? It is not clear from the recommendation the council has identified what its goals and objectives are relative to secondary or advisory committees. I would humbly suggest that council, sooner rather than later, identify what its goals would be for these committees. These committees are clearly a governance area. Therefore, the identification of goals and objectives are the purview of council rather than that of administration or management. In this, administration's role is to provide facilitation support. Committees are an important means to enhance the legitimacy of the city as an institution. They are at one level a network and a relationship between council, the city, and its residents. At another level, they provide training in civics to their members at a time when this is hard to come by. Advisory committees can then be an important component in building and securing the legitimacy of our city's governance and its institutions. This is an achievable vision. How might one break this vision down into more specific and achievable goals and objectives? What could some of these advisory committee goals be? Proactive and forward thinking in identifying trends and opportunities. Operate as an open and transparent link to the community. Foster and facilitate information gathering and sharing. Share expertise, experience, and perspectives regarding program issues and strategies. Advise on current trends. Provide a mechanism for dialogue and consensus building with the community. Act as a resource and provide input to staff. What should some of these advisory objectives be? Advise council on strategic opportunities. Advise council on policy related to a specific policy field or functional area on the environment, on the arts, and so on. Provide staff with feedback on program specifications and requirements. Explore long-range problems in order to provide advice to council and facilitate public deliberation and debate. Council should also consider that committees need to have a clearly defined mandate. Advisory committee members need to represent diverse points of view that include both an expert and social perspective. There can and perhaps should be a mix of professional and technical and citizen lay members. Members should represent their field area, not their interests. Why do people volunteer for advisory boards? They desire to become involved and give something back to the community. They believe that they can help shape policy. They are looking to fulfill a civic duty. They are looking for a change of pace or to add variety to their life. They are wishing to donate their professional skill. They want to have an impact. They want to garner some recognition. They might want to meet other people. They want to become a part of something bigger. These are important human drivers. I expect council would not only like to tap into, but nurture as well. As a bit of an aside, council may also want to consider revising how these two types of committees are described, primary and secondary committees. This suggests a hierarchy rather than a governance function. In closing, council should establish what political outcome it wants to achieve in a strategic manner. It should spend the time needed to identify the goals and objectives of its advisory committees, the mandate and field of each of the committees. During this process, it needs to keep in mind that committees are a form of communications and legitimacy building. However, they are not the only kind. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Arger, for your presentation. There are members of council who have questions. Councilor Frondera.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Dr. Argy, for your presentation. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. My quick question to you, I'm seeing this expertise there. Could you just give me a little bit more about your experience within the committees or council committees?
Yeah, my experience really comes from over 30 years studying these issues as an academic, or quasi-academic, I guess, and as serving as a person who served on many committees, including the Canadian Association for the Study of Cooperatives at one time, including the Arts Committee in Regina for a period of time, as well as working for the Saskatchewan Wheat Pool, where I was a management person working with and fostering the development of committees. So I have experience on the academic front, from serving on committees, and from managing them from an administrative front. And they bring forward very important issues for me, who likes to look at the interconnection of governance and democracy and management.
Thank you for that, Dr. Argy. Another question. There's a little mention in the interest when there are individuals that come on certain committees that just brings a certain interest. Can you just kind of explain a little bit more what you mean by that, or how
Sure.
you see that?
One of the challenges with advisory committees is when they become sort of captive of interest groups that are represented behind the members of the committees that are there. Generally, advisory committees work best when they represent the field they're from rather than the interests that they're from, and that they can put forward sort of a collective broad interest as opposed to a very narrow interest.
Thank you for that. Just one more on the not clear in the recommendation. Could you just kind of explain a little bit more? I've read your report.
Well, I guess my suggestion would be is that council needs to take a hold of this, that it needs to, in council, if you will, amongst itself, decide what its objectives and goals should be for these committees. This is really critical. This is not a management function. This is a small p political function. This is a governance function. This is something that sits clearly in the purview of those who are elected. And my recommendation would be is that's where the driving force should come from for any advisory committee review.
Your Worship, Dr. Argue, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Ventura. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery and we'll now consider the report for us. Report is the Committee Structure Review, 14-32. Councilor Hawkins. You'd like to put your microphone on too, Councilor Hawkins?
I move the recommendations in C 14-32 of the Executive Committee set out in 1 to 7 at that document.
Okay, that's good. You perhaps just go into some details to what's being recommended, if you could do that.
That no changes be made to the existing committee structure, membership, or mandate of the main committees of council, and the 7 main committees are listed. Secondly, that notwithstanding that recommendation, that the Public Works Committee be renamed Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Third, that administration undertake a review of the items being submitted for committee consideration to ensure that the item is placed on the appropriate committee agenda and provide a report back to the Executive Committee by March 31st, 2015. 4, that no changes be made at this time to the existing structure, membership, or mandate of the following secondary committees, and those are set out in 4. 5, that members of secondary committees of council whose terms have expired remain as members of the committee until such time as they are either reappointed or a successor is appointed by council. 6, that notwithstanding recommendation 3, that the administration prepare a report outlining leading practices, interjurisdictional comparisons, and options respecting civic engagement practices that could enhance, complement, or replace the existing committee structure and related practices, and return to Executive Committee in the third quarter of 2014. And 7, that the city solicitor prepare the necessary bylaw changes respecting the recommendations of 2 and 5. Your Worship, I just note that number 3 requires a report back to the Executive Committee by March 31st, 2015. I'm wondering if that isn't a bit tight as a deadline given the current date.
We could ask the administration that, their comments on that. And Mr. Davies, do you want to try that one? This is with respect to recommendation number 3, a deadline being March 31st, 2015. That's too much of a tight time frame?
Although I see, Your Worship, that it's 2015,
yes,
not 2014.
Yeah. Just asking a question. Yes. So, the question's been asked. Do we have an answer?
I think
Mr. Davies.
Your Worship, I think the answer is yes, it's doable, and that's the answer.
Perfect.
Thank you
Good.
very much.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Comments on the report? Call the question. Councilor Federa.
Your Worship, just had to kind of collect my thought. It was just kind of escaped me, but it's came back here. As we doing the review, I'm just going to put a broad question. Like for instance, Dr. Argue brought a really good suggestions or comments. Do we extend our arm when we look at different external advisory things? How that would look like? To Your Worship, I'm just asking administration if something like that works. I mean, administration doesn't know what they're doing, but I'm just looking at. I think,
Councilor Federa, if you look at the recommendation number 6, we're looking for a very wide review, and that will take into the issues you've talked about and what Dr. Argue is talking about. We'll do this in our own way, of course, but we will be looking at the purpose and the reason for these committees and what we're trying to achieve with it. That's very much as in keeping with what recommendation number 6 talks about.
I wanted to hear it, general public to hear it, just so it's out there. Okay, that's the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to we have communications from Brent Moore. I don't know if he's in the audience. He says he would be for questions. Just for questions, okay. So I have a mover and seconder to receive the communications. Okay.
I'll move the recommended disposition of the communication.
And the seconder, please.
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll move on to the Planning Commission report. This is a concept plan for the Hawkstone portion. Councilor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm bringing forward CR 14-33. It's a recommendation of the Regina Planning Commission from its February 12, 2014 meeting, that the application to amend the Hawkstone concept plan as depicted on the attached appendix be approved, that the extension of Argyle Street from the limits of Argyle Park subdivision to Rochdale Boulevard be included in the first place of subdivision. And I'd go on to say that the applicant proposes to amend a portion of the Hawkstone concept plan to accommodate a minor increase in commercial, mixed use, and institutional use. And this decreases the projected property residential population by about 400 people. There were no issues identified by residents. It also will result in an improved road network. And the plan is consistent with policies in the official community plan. It's compatible with existing development and uses in the Hawkstone concept plan. So I ask for concurrence.
Concurrence is moved. Councilor Flegel, you have some comments.
Thank you. Another piece of the pie that's coming together in the north of the pipeline. So my one question, this is about Argyle Road hitting Rochdale Boulevard. And I asked the question at planning, but I want to know from council point of view. We're still on track to at least get some plan or design for 2014 with structural starting in sometime in 15, if that's still correct.
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, ask Mr. Brown, Manager of Infrastructure Planning, to handle that question, please.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Through Mr. Worship, essentially the construction of Argyle Street would be through as the development progresses, and as the recommendation asks that Argyle Street be part of that first phase. So that would be, an estimation that that could potentially take place in 2014. In terms of that road and construction, that actually is a partially city-funded road through servicing agreement fees, and that would be something that would have to be budgeted actually in 2015.
Sorry? 2015? Okay, I couldn't quite hear him in the final. Have we got the, I understand that there's 3 different landowners going to partially pay this road, or is it just down to 2? Because I know the Axelson Group, the City Group, and the only name I know is the Gilroy Group. Are those still the 3, or are we down to 2?
Mr. Wilson? Oh, sorry. Mr. Brown. Sorry.
Through Your Worship, essentially the Hawkstone concept plan area is actually 3 owners. The Hawkstone Group, the Axelson Group, which goes under a different development name, and actually the City of Regina as well, too. I think the one group is nearing the completion of their phases in terms of developments, in terms of subdivision. This next piece is really the Axelson portion.
So, okay, good. Thank you. One other thing, I know that it's down the road, but people are asking already about transit. So how far ahead do I need to recommend or ask the administration, if the road's built, I'm being told right now that no transit is going in there until that road is built. So if the road is going to be built for 2015, can we queue up transit to start in 2015, or do we have to apply again, or how does that work?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, annually we look at where neighborhoods are growing, and transit looks at potential extensions within neighborhoods. I'd also advise that we're coming forward at some point with a concept plan amendment to Hawkstone to address some of the study area that was identified in the original approval on city land. So that'd be a really good opportunity at that time to have a discussion around transit, because we'd identify transit route on the plan.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flegel. Other comments? Councilor Verdura?
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to administration. This discussion, there's school, the community center, and I know there hasn't been really any difficulties with residents worrying about the traffic through the area. Can I get a little bit kind of comfort to see how that's going to look like, Your Worship?
Mr. Carlston?
Your Worship, I'll start with the general response. I might seek some additional context or detail from Mr. Brown, but certainly when the Hawkstone Plan was approved by City Council, there was extensive public consultation as well with the school boards, because there's a school south along Argyle, and that clearly was one of the concerns. So we modeled the traffic, anticipated, and would expect that as traffic increases within the neighborhood, there would be corresponding sort of upgrades to safety features along the roadways. Don't know if Mr. Brown would want to elaborate upon that.
Mr. Brown?
Through you, Your Worship, that's essentially correct. Yes, I mean, in terms of as that Argyle Street connection is connected to the lands to the south, which then, of course, goes by the school, we'd want to look at some treatments, especially around the crossing of the pipeline that's just to the south of there, and as well around the school to possibly include some things like traffic calming and such that would make drivers essentially consider slowing down. And of course, not only just with the slower speed signs in there, but also provide some contextual size of width of the roadways to make them think about slowing down as well too.
Okay, thank you, Worship. Just a quick comment, and I think that would keep the Hawkstone addition and the road. That will keep the Argyle Park, Argyle schools, and community kind of a little more alive, because you have new neighborhood, new families moving in. So I think that with the traffic calming and with paying attention to that particular road, which is going to be busy, I think overall, I think that's going to be a good thing for keeping Argyle going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Frinder. Other questions or comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Our next delegation is Riley Balon. Please come forward, identify yourself, who you represent. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
My name is Riley Ballon, and I guess I'm representing all the low-income and people on assistance within the City of Regina. Good evening, members of City Council and senior administration. My name is Riley Ballon, and I'm here representing all those who struggle to find safe, affordable housing in the City of Regina. This struggle is met by people who are unable to find work, students, part-time workers, and others who make low income. Thank you. I would like to say thank you for taking time to bring this situation to light. Providing financial assistance to programs that help build and sustain affordable, safe housing in Regina is very important to reduce crime, poverty, and homelessness itself. Without programs and partnerships like this, any housing would not be accessible as it is now. The definition of affordable housing in the City of Regina is failing the residents that don't make a large amount of money a month, not checking up on the developers to keep them on track of building low-income housing they say they would, is also failing the residents of Regina. To past and present people in shelters, there is very little safe and affordable housing that is available to them. As I've experienced and I've heard firsthand, the people that have expressed that they feel the city is doing nothing to bring affordable housing into the city that is safe for people in recovery, fleeing from abuse, raising children, or that are unable to work. Looking online, in the newspaper, and other listings for vacancies, there is very little to offer that is safe for under a certain amount. When I say low income, I'm talking about a yearly income of approximately $20,000 or less. The most requested and sought after rental units I have seen are rented out monthly. Are for a bachelor apartment, $771.40. One bedroom is $1,056.10. Two bedrooms being $1,411 on average. This is not taking into account the quality, safety, cleanliness, accessibility, or landlord responsibility of the unit. Giving you an example of how unsustainable these prices are, I will share with you how much I received during a month from the Ministry of Social Services under the Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disabilities, the SAID program. I get $459 a month, not including utilities, which many landlords ask you to pay separate from rent. I receive a maximum of $256 that I qualify for each month from the Saskatchewan Rental Housing Supplement Guidelines. This gives me $715 a month for rent and I'm currently living at a place that is not safe. The neighborhood is not clean, and the crime rate is high because I begged my former landlord to let me live there. For those who are between jobs, they do not have the $459 deposit letter that I would have leaving a shelter if we even managed to find a place, even if it was accepted by places like Avenue Living or Boardwalk. They would try and find something within their price range that will allow them to pay rent for a place, and they don't have to worry about them and their children if they have dependents. Getting hurt due to crime and or unsafe living conditions of the unit in question, or going hungry trying to pay rent, food or bills. The homelessness partnering strategy and Housing First is a great idea, but it needs to be applied in a very practical manner. And the people who have been given money in the past, need to be held responsible for how they spend it. Instead of giving, looking at how much developers are losing by letting the less fortunate being housed in these buildings, or how much low-income, or making low-income housing. They need to look at the amazing press and the continued income they will be gaining after the people are helped. City Council, the big picture needs to be looked at. Current resources are being used as a cure-all instead of prevention. If safe, affordable housing was available at a good rate, emergency shelters would not be overflowing on an almost daily basis. This would be used for actual emergencies. Emergency rooms and other hospital resources would not be stretched so thin that the police would not have such a high crime rate throughout the year, especially when people need places to stay when it gets cold or they get hungry. I indirectly pay property tax, as do almost all people who rent. When the 5.88% tax gets implemented, the landlords will pass this on to all renters, not to mention the utility rates too. How much more food can I cut back on? I'm already using the soup kitchen food bank and asking people around me for money for food. And if I do pay for food to eat through a month, which bill do I almost get cut off? If I pay all my bills and pay for food, how much am I going to be behind on rent? This is sadly a very common problem in the city. I've talked to someone on assistance in Indiana, and she's only experienced housing prices based on her income. As a city, are we now worse than a whole U.S. state? Instead of giving developers money and not really checking in with what they're doing with it, they need to meet sustainable requirements for safe, affordable housing. More apartment complexes instead of houses would be quite a good example. High-density housing would fill such a demand in the city, taking quite a bit of homeless children off the streets along with their parents. Single people that are homeless would greatly benefit from this too. At the end of the day, the city needs to take strict action if they're going to actually follow through with their word. Low-income people in the city need to see this from the people they voted for. Thank you for your time. I will now take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery. Oh, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, sir. Just thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report. Councillor Hawkins, D 14-35, the homelessness partnering strategy.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Microphone. Perhaps you want to turn on your microphone.
On recommendation of the Executive Committee, one, that Council endorse in principle the homelessness partnering strategy and Housing First by continuing to complement the work of the federal government through existing city programs. Two, that the administration continue to provide regular updates, including any financial implications, to the Mayor's Housing Commission and Council on homelessness partnering strategy, Homelessness First, and other homelessness issues.
Thank you. Other comments on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to say, I think this is a good step in the right direction. Ultimately, you know, there's a lot of other examples around Canada and North America of people doing this. So, you know, I think it's a long time coming here, but we're you know, this is a positive step in the right direction. Ultimately, I think Regina needs to have our own solution as far as a plan to end homelessness. So I think this isn't that, but this is something we need to be working towards ASAP. Thanks.
Councillor Hawkins, could you take the chair, please?
Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and pleased to see this report before us. Just some general comments about this report, and members will know this has come from Executive Committee, so I won't repeat the discussions there. I wanted to say this is the main thrust of federal support for housing and homelessness is through the $5.5 million transfer over 5 years to Regina. And that's all well and good, and we do appreciate that. But this is a cautious approach by council, and rightly so, for most municipalities. We've been asking the federal government for a long-term strategy on housing. Don't have that. This is for social housing, below-market housing. While this report speaks to homelessness and the Housing First strategy, we enter this domain with, as I say, caution because of our limited resources, and constitutionally it's not our responsibility for housing. But we also work to improve the lives of people in our city, so we are a partner as best that we can be, but in a limited way. The Housing First strategy is a relatively new concept where the focus is on the individual receiving stable housing first, and then receiving support for his or her issues related to mental health or drug addiction or whatever it may be. And those are absolutely foundational and critical. What we have to remember as council, though, is that it is not our responsibility to provide those services that social services does, or the federal government or the province. This report, in my view, and I hope that the council accepts this, is that we will be a partner as best we can. But we want to make sure that we don't overstretch ourselves financially. We do provide grants, we provide exemptions for those units that will be used as part of this strategy, and that's all well and good because we have resources to do that. And I think we should be doing this. This is a national strategy. We're helping to access $5.5 million, which you otherwise wouldn't have. So we'll get reports back to talk about what this looks like, to talk about its impact on our community, and talk about the impact of the City of Regina as a partner with many community groups and the province and federal government as we go forward. So I'd ask members of council to support this, knowing we will receive reports fairly frequently on how this goes forward. Thank you. Comments on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So Mr. Elliott is not here. So if I could have a motion to receive his communication.
I'll move the recommended disposition of the communication, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Seconder, please. Councilor Hawkins. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll move into a number of bylaws. Before we do this, I'd ask for a tabling motion for bylaw 14-26. A motion to table.
I'll move that tabling motion, Your Worship.
Seconder, please. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaws 2014-21, 2014-22, 2014-24, 2014-25, and 2014-29 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Your Worship, I move, seconded by Councillor Burnett, that bylaws 20-14, 21, 22, 24, 25, and 29 be read a second time.
Any comments or questions? I'll make one comment. Members will note this is the final time we have council or committees on the current bylaws. That goes in relation to the time that delegations speak and other things in here. So the rules now change after we pass this tonight. Call the question on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Hanks, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2014, 21, 22, 24, 25, and 29 go to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaws 2014, 21, 22, 24, 25, and 29 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We move on to Community and Protective Services, Report 1434. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I rise in support of CR 1434 and its Regina Rugby Club agreement. Our agenda was a whoppingly one piece of stuff we had to get done, and this is just to authorize the Executive Director of Community Planning and Development to negotiate and approve an agreement between the City of Regina and Regina Rugby Unions. And this is the building on 25th and Pasco Street, just behind the SGI Claims Center. And this actually, people maybe aren't aware of it, but I just want to say this, that more and more people use it than just a rugby club. It's a restaurant, it's a little bar, it's a outdoor volleyball, beach volleyball in the summer, obviously not in the winter. And there's another couple of fields around there. So anybody can use access to the washrooms, public, if they want to go get a hamburger or hot dog or even a beverage of their choice, it's available. So it's not just for the rugby club, and they are open to access for the public, and that's a great thing. So it's been a good joint venture for a lot of years, and I think it'll continue for a while. So we recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Comments on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move on to Executive Committee reports. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of the Executive Committee, I move Council's concurrence in the following. One, that the nominees of the organizational representatives on the remaining committees outlined in the attached chart be appointed for terms of office effective at April 1 to December 31, 2014, unless otherwise noted. And two, that the members appointed continue upon the expiration of their terms to hold office until their successors are appointed.
Okay. Other comments or questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And move on to Planning Commission. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm bringing forward for Council CR 1437, recommendation of the Regina Planning Commission from March 12, 2014, that a discretionary use application for the proposed vocational school located at 2110 East Red Bear Avenue, being Lot 7, Block 47, Plan Number 102110533, Extension 3, Ross Industrial Subdivision, be approved, and that the development permit be issued subject to the following conditions: that the development shall be consistent with the plans attached to this report, and as listed in Appendix 3.1. And that the development shall comply with all applicable standards and regulations in Regina zoning bylaw number 9250. This is a proposal to develop a vocational school on the subject property, and it complies with the development standards and regulations in zoning bylaw 9250, and it's consistent with the policies contained in the Regina Development Plan bylaw official community plan. I ask for concurrence.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Comments on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Young on report 38.
I bring forward CR 1438 from the Regina Planning Commission meeting of March 12, 2014, that the discretionary use application for a proposed house form commercial located at 2321 Rose Street, Lot 27, Block 463, Plan Number 101187312, OLD 33 subdivision be approved, and that the development permit be issued subject to the following conditions: that the development shall be consistent with the plan attached to this report in Appendix A3 inclusive, and that the development shall comply with all applicable standards and regulations in Regina zoning bylaw 9250. This is a two-story house, and it's being asked that it be used as a house form commercial. The subject property is currently zoned transitional area residential and located within the Central Square neighborhood, and the proposal complies with development standards and regulations contained in zoning bylaw 9250, and it's consistent with the policies in the OCP. I recommend concurrence.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Comments on this report or questions? Seeing there are none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have a couple of information reports, and I'll ask the Council to consider these separately. I'm in a conflict of interest on the second report, so I'd ask if we could talk about, have a motion for the New Build Canada Fund. Motion for that, please.
I can move a motion that we receive the informational reports on IR 14.4.
Thank you for that. A seconder, please. Councilor Hawkins, thank you. Ms. Harmachuk, could you just give us a bit of an overview of this report? This is a review of the federal infrastructure program coming as of the last federal budget, and Ms. Harmachuk can give us an overview, please.
Through your worship. At the last Big City Mayors Caucus meeting at the end of February, we learned a few more details, but not all of them, on the New Building Canada plan that is to take effect in this construction season of 2014. So if I could just draw your attention to the chart that I have attached to the item. I'd just like to draw your attention to a few issues. So the yellow block on the chart, we've got the New Building Canada plan, just to outline that it's a 10-year plan, and it'll be reviewed after 5 years. I'll just quickly, if it's okay with you, Your Worship, go through the rest. So in pink, we've got what's called the Community Improvement Fund. Neither of those funds are new. The gas tax fund is now permanent and will be indexed at 2% a year on a permanent basis. That's enshrined in legislation. And for the City of Regina, just to note that we expect to receive $11.1 million gas tax funding for 2014. GST rebate, again, not new. The city expects to receive $7.2 million this year for 2014. Then if I could move down to the heart of the framework, which is the New Building Canada Fund in the blue blocks. So first of all, we've got what they're calling the National Infrastructure Component. I don't have a whole lot of details on this yet. I can only tell you that it is for support of infrastructure projects of national significance, that these projects will be determined competition-based or on merit only, and that this time the projects will be approved by the Government of Canada alone. I can just also say, as you'll note, I list below the criteria and some of the project categories. But just to note that we have additional entities that can qualify for this funding, and those are listed as well. But just to mention them: a province or a territory or a municipal government, a band council, public sector body, for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. Also to note that federal funding will be capped at 1/3 of the project costs. There may be an exception for highways and major roads, as well as public transit, which could be cost shared up to 50%. The provincial territorial infrastructure component is probably the one where most of our municipal infrastructure funding would come from. That's got $9 billion over the next 10 years. Now those, like I say, that's a fund that we will probably draw our funding from. However, we have a few issues with this, and that's first of all, we've got again competition because they've opened up eligible recipients into province or territory, band council, public sector body. They've also opened this one up under innovation to post-secondary institutions. So there's a lot more competition for these funds. In addition, we're not sure how much, if any of this particular fund will go just towards municipalities. FCM is pushing for 70% of these funds to go to communities, but we have no commitment on that whatsoever. The other and the last note that I'd like to point out is that under the gas tax fund, they have now removed local roads. Under the gas tax fund, they've added local roads, sport, recreation, infrastructure, and culture and tourism. These are now moved into the gas tax fund, which will add new projects and take away from what we use our gas tax funding for already. So with that note, I don't have a whole lot of more details. We're expecting some very soon because this is supposed to begin next month. And as soon as we get some, I'll be sure to provide updates.
Thank you for that very good update. Any questions for the administration on this one? I'll call for the question on this report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. To say thank you for splitting these two reports. I'm in a conflict on this one. It deals with the stadium, which I declared a conflict at the executive committee as well.
Thank you. I move to item information report 4-5 from the executive committee. I'll need a mover and a seconder for this. Councillor Hinks moved, seconded by Councillor Young. Would anybody like to address this? I can address it very briefly if no one else. I just say that this is a very familiar item to us all now. It's the notification that PCL Construction Management, Inc. has been notified that they have been identified as the preferred proponent to work with the city to complete the design, construction, and interim financing of the stadium project. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Opposed? Motion carried. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, Councillor Wade. Councillor Findura. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much for a long meeting.